Imagine waking up, knowing the world belongs to you. The armies, the cities, the temples, the coins, all bearing your name. You are the Emperor of Rome, the ruler of the known world. And yet, you cannot breathe too deeply. Because the air feels heavy with incense and fear. Because the very walls that protect you were built by men who might already be plotting your death. Because absolute power in Rome is not a gift. It's a trap made of marble and silence. Tonight, we won't tell the story of a battle or a conquest. No drama, no triumph, no cinematic score. Instead, we'll do something simpler and slower. We'll live just one day in the life of a Roman emperor. A real day. Not one etched in stone or sung by poets, but the kind that begins with creaking joints and ends with whispers in the hallway. A day filled with itchy robes, too much wine, scrolls no one reads, and a stomachache you're too afraid to mention out loud. So before we begin, I'd invite you to do what Roman emperors rarely could. Get comfortable. Dim the lights. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, like distant wind across a Roman courtyard. And if you're lying in bed, I promise you're already luckier than most of the men who wore the crown, because they didn't sleep peacefully. To be Emperor of Rome was to wear a crown made of olive leaves and dread. There was no instruction manual, no job description, no retirement plan. Once you stepped into the purple, you belonged to history or the dagger, often both. The word emperor didn't start as a royal title. In Latin, imperator simply meant commander. It was a military honor shouted by soldiers after a victory in battle. Only later did it become the weighty, dangerous thing we now imagine, the supreme ruler of an empire stretching from the misty forests of Britain to the hot, dusty streets of Egypt. It wasn't supposed to last. Rome was a republic after all, or so it claimed. But as the centuries dragged on and generals became gods, the republic faded like old paint. What remained was a strange experiment. One man at the center of a machine too large for any one person to understand. They called him Augustus, Caesar, Princeps, Dominus, father of the nation, Pontifex Maximus, ruler of the world, living God. But in private, he was just a man in sandals with a headache. There were emperors who reigned for decades. There were emperors who reigned for days. Some were philosophers, some were warriors, some were teenagers, drunk with power and perfume. All of them, in the end, were alone. They lived in palaces, yes, but palaces filled with whispers. They dined on delicacies, with food tasters watching every bite. They signed laws with trembling hands, not from fear of making a mistake, but from fear that someone would twist the law into their own noose. To be emperor was to be everything and nothing, sacred but disposable, immortal in marble, but still very much stabbable in real life. So tonight, let's not rush. Let's slow the world down. Let's take one deep breath and step back in time, to the heart of the Roman Empire. To the marble corridors and flickering torches, to the thrones that no one ever truly sat on comfortably. And ask one quiet question. What was it really like to be a Roman emperor? The answer, of course, depends on the emperor, on the century, on who's holding the knife. Some emperors woke up surrounded by silks, concubines, and musicians plucking lutes in the atrium. Others woke up to the news that their guard commander had defected in the night. Some were born into power. Others bought it, stole it, or had it handed to them by desperate senators hoping to stay alive another week. But no matter how you got there, the view from the top was always the same. A golden ceiling, a cold floor, and the creeping sense that everyone in the room smiled just a little too much when you looked away. You'd think ruling an empire would be a thrill, but it was more often a kind of performance, a slow, grinding play where everyone knew the ending, but no one dared to say it out loud. Wake up, pretend to feel rested, let someone oil your hair, nod as someone reads the grain reports from Egypt, make a face that looks wise, then spend the rest of the day avoiding being poisoned, manipulated, or remembered as the emperor who thought flamingos were a good investment. The worst part, the empire didn't stop. Not when you were sick, not when you were tired, not even when your wife gave you that look across the dining couch that meant she might be plotting something again. You were the axle of the Roman world. If you turned too slowly, things broke. If you turned too fast, things shattered. You were both irreplaceable and already being replaced in someone else's imagination. Even sleep couldn't be trusted. Dreams were interpreted as omens, nightmares written down by priests. If you saw a crow, or a bleeding fig tree, or a three-headed calf in your sleep, someone would turn it into a speech, or a reason to revolt. It was lonely, being emperor, not because there weren't people around, not because most of them weren't real, not with you, not with themselves, just actors in the same dangerous play. But tonight, you're not the historian, you're not the watcher, you're the one wearing the crown. And now, it's morning in ancient Rome, and you've just woken up. Chapter 1. Waking up as emperors. You wake before the sun, not because you want to, but because someone coughed in the hallway, and you've trained yourself to wake at the sound of anything suspicious. Your bed is wide, unnecessarily so. The mattress, stuffed with feathers, is soft in all the wrong places and lumpy in the others. It creaks faintly when you shift your weight. The sheets are linen, dyed in the expensive imperial shade of purple. They're heavy, warm, and slightly damp with sweat. You don't remember falling asleep, but you remember the whine and the dull ache in your side. A familiar tension that never goes away, not even with 3 cups and a flute player humming from behind the curtain. A sliver of morning light peeks through the high windows, and for a brief moment you forget who you are. Then you see the sandals lined up perfectly by your bedside, polished, waiting, and you remember, you are the Emperor of Rome, and your day has already begun. There is no alarm clock, only the soft shuffle of footsteps. 3 servants enter the room in silence. You pretend not to notice them, but they're watching you, always. One stands at the foot of the bed, holding a clean tunic. Another holds a scroll. The third, the youngest, carries a bowl of warm water for washing. None of them speak, not unless spoken to. You sit up slowly. Your back cracks, so does your knee. You're 42 years old, which, in Roman years, is already flirting with elder status. Your hair is thinning. Your face is puffy from last night's fish sauce. And there's a strange pain in your shoulder that your physician insists is an imbalance of the humors. But you rise anyway, because emperors don't stay in bed. Not if they want to stay emperors. Your first act of the day is letting someone else wash your face. The warm cloth is soothing until the scroll begins. News from Antioch, your aide clears his throat. A fire in the merchant quarter. Grain reserves are undamaged. A minor riot was suppressed. You nod, slowly, as if you care, as if you might do something about it. He continues. Word from Britannia. The governor reports that morale is low, the weather is poor, and the barbarians are still annoying. Another nod. You focus on the warm cloth, and wonder if today will be one of those days where someone tries to kill you before lunch. Your palace is quiet in the morning. Too quiet. Marble echoes. Every sandal step sounds like a drumbeat in a bathhouse. The statues lining the corridor all have your face, or rather, the face they think you want to see. Youthful, heroic, square-jawed, dignified. You glance at one as you pass. It doesn't blink, but you do. And for a moment, you wonder if the sculptor got the nose wrong on purpose. Breakfast is waiting in the side chamber. Not that you're hungry. A small platter, olives, goat cheese, dried figs, and a slice of bread that feels like it was baked in 300 BCE. You nibble. You chew slowly. You pretend to enjoy it. Wine is offered. You decline. Too early. Even for you. Even for Rome. You take a sip of water, filtered, boiled, cooled, served in a cup made of polished onyx. You catch your reflection, and you don't recognize the man looking back. The beard is fuller than you expected. The eyes are tired. The lines around your mouth are deeper than they were last spring. And the scar on your temple, the one from the hunting accident, still hasn't faded. You remember that day. You remember the arrow. You remember who was standing behind you when it was loosed. You also remember what happened to him. He died of a sudden, tragic illness. 2 days later, no one questioned it. After breakfast, you are dressed. First, the inner tunic, linen, cool against the skin. Then the belt, wide and stiff. Then the toga. Ah, the toga, an absurd creation. 20 feet of fine wool, dyed imperial purple, wrapped, tucked, folded, adjusted. It takes 2 men to dress you in it properly. 3, if they're nervous. It itches, it pinches. It weighs as much as a well-fed dog, but it's what emperors wear, so you wear it. As the final fold is pinned in place, you inhale deeply, the scent of beeswax, of cedar, of oil and anxiety. Then you exhale and nod. You are now dressed, and the roll begins. A few moments of silence follow. The attendants leave. You are alone again. You sit on the wooden bench beside the window. The breeze carries in the faint smell of incense, ash, and overripe figs. Below, the city murmurs. Distant vendors shouting, a cartwheel creaking, dogs barking. Somewhere out there, a boy is playing in the dirt. A girl is learning to spin wool. A man is cursing the gods because his roof collapsed in last night's storm. They will never see your face, but they know your name. They curse it. They pray to it. They carve it into stone. And if you died tomorrow, they'd keep going. That is power, and that is the loneliness of it. A knock at the door. 3 sharp taps. Your schedule has arrived. You rise carefully. There's still that pain in your side. No one has figured out what it is, and no one dares press too hard to find out. The scroll is unrolled. Your aide recites it with perfect neutrality. First, an audience with the governor of Judea, then a hearing with the grain merchants, a midday speech in the forum, a private lunch with the Vestal virgins, and at dusk, a brief visit to the Senate. You nod and ask the only question that really matters: is my food taster still alive? Your aide blinks. Last I checked, yes. Good, you say. You force a smile and begin the long walk toward your throne. As you walk through the hallway toward the reception chamber, each footstep echoes like a reminder that you're not just a man today, you're a symbol. The marble under your sandals is cold, even in summer. The palace was designed to impress foreign dignitaries, not to keep your toes warm. Statues of past emperors line the corridor, each one carved to appear strong, serene, divine. Some were poisoned in that very room to your right, others stabbed in the garden behind you, and now they stare at you in polished stone, eyes blank, mouths frozen in expressions of eternal restraint. You pass each one without breaking stride, but your mind catalogues them. Which ones lasted, which ones didn't, which ones ended up with temples in their honor, and which were quietly erased from the official records. A slave bows low and opens the door. Inside, your scribes wait with fresh ink and an overwhelming number of updates from the provinces. A tray of new petitions has arrived, stacked neatly like offerings to a disinterested god. You don't recognize half the names. They all want something: a tax reduced, a cousin pardoned, a road repaired, a villa expanded. You will read maybe 3 of them today. Your signature will be stamped on another 20. The rest, well, Rome is built on paperwork, and most of it is answered with silence. You lower yourself onto the ivory chair, the one with the stiff back that always leaves your shoulders sore. It was made for ceremony, not comfort. You glance over at your chamberlain, who stands as still as a statue with a wax tablet in hand, waiting to take down any words you might speak. You consider giving him something interesting, like an offhand command to send wine to the soldiers in the north. But then you remember that even a joke becomes a directive if it comes from the emperor's mouth. So you stay quiet. A physician enters and bows, holding out a tiny vial. He murmurs something about your digestion, about how the last batch of oysters might not have been as fresh as they appeared. You drink it without question, because even if it does nothing, refusing it sends the wrong message. You don't want to insult the doctor, or make the kitchen staff nervous, or suggest, heaven forbid, that your stomach is weaker than your father's. They say your father could eat 12 boiled eggs and ride a horse the same morning. Of course, they also say he died choking on a grape. The truth doesn't matter anymore. The myth does. As emperor, your body is not your own. It belongs to the state. Every sneeze is a potential omen. Every limp, a crisis. You glance out the window again. The sky is brighter now, a pale Roman blue. You can hear the city waking, carts rolling down cobbled streets, vendors calling out the price of their olives, their onions, their cheap fish. Somewhere, someone is hammering something. Somewhere else, someone is being flogged. The empire is in motion, even if you're not. You rise from the chair. The toga shifts on your shoulders, heavy, uncomfortable, ceremonial. There's a meeting in the eastern portico with your advisor on military logistics. You'll be shown charts, red lines on maps, arrows pointing to places you'll never visit. You'll be asked to approve movements of legions based on numbers you suspect are exaggerated. You'll nod, you'll give permission. and you'll wonder quietly whether the general in charge of the 8th Legion still holds a grudge for what you said to him at the banquet last spring. At some point, you realize you haven't eaten enough. Your stomach growls faintly. The servants notice. One of them offers you a bowl of stewed lentils. You wave it away. You don't want lentils. You want sleep. You want peace. You want a day without pretending. But instead, you prepare to hear complaints from the Senate about land reforms. You steel yourself for flattery laced with threat. You rehearse the expression of benevolent boredom, the one that says you're above it all, even if your right ankle is cramping again. You think about cancelling the evening appearance at the theatre, but then you remember, if you don't show, people will talk. If you do show, they'll still talk, but at least they'll be talking where you can see them. So you say yes, and another name is added to the guest list. And still, the day has barely begun. There is no such thing as a light schedule for an emperor. Every decision, no matter how small, is an echo in a vast chamber, a whisper that becomes law, a gesture that becomes tradition. Even doing nothing at all is considered strategy. Your stillness is interpreted as wisdom, your pause as poise. Even your silence can be misread as divine insight or weakness. You glance at the bronze sundial in the courtyard. The shadow falls across the hour mark. Your next appointment begins in minutes. You consider stopping to adjust your toga, to ask for another cup of watered wine, but instead you straighten your shoulders, nod to the guards, and begin walking once more, back into the theatre of leadership, back into the Empire's breathless expectations. It will be hours before you're alone again. And even then, not truly, because the guards outside your door never leave. And neither do the voices in your head, the ones reminding you that no emperor in Rome has ever truly died of old age. Chapter 2. Public Life and Spectacle. The public life of a Roman emperor was not a life of privacy, nor was it one of peace. It was a life lived in the gaze of thousands, perhaps millions, across marble forums, amphitheaters, temples, and dusty provincial outposts. From the moment you ascend to the throne, your body no longer belongs solely to you. It becomes a symbol, a ritual, a performance. Every appearance is calculated, every movement observed. The day begins not with solitude, but with summons. Messengers arrive with tightly wound scrolls, requests for public appearances, dedications of new roads, temple reconsecrations, and the inauguration of fountains. Each event comes with an expectation that the emperor will smile, speak, and embody the unshakable dignity of Rome. The carriage is prepared, painted in the deep reds and gilded accents that signal imperial presence. Soldiers form an escort, not just for protection, but for spectacle. The people must see your power, must feel it ripple outward like heat from the stone-paved roads. You are not a man in this moment. You are the idea of Rome, incarnate. The forum is already alive. Vendors call out. Temples burn fragrant offerings. Senators in white togas stand in careful rows. Murmurs ripple as your procession nears. Faces turn. Children wave. Some bow. Others do not. You notice, but you do not react. An emperor must see all, respond to little, and remember everything. You dismount near the Temple of Concord. Priests wait with laurel branches and formal greetings. You recite a blessing, not because you believe in its power, but because belief is not required of emperors, only the performance of belief. You offer a libation. You nod as incense swirls and chants rise. The temple steps beneath your feet are worn by centuries, but your stride is steady. Later, you make your way to the Curia Julia. The Senate meets today. The chamber is tall and solemn. Its acoustics carry every cough, every shuffle. You do not speak first. That honor belongs to the consul. But your silence is heavier than their words. When you finally rise, all voices fall away. You offer no fiery oration, no thunderous decree, just a brief address, measured, calm, deliberate. You thank the senators for their counsel. You remind them of their duty. You mention a recent triumph in a distant province. You do not exaggerate. You do not need to. Your voice is enough. Afterward, you walk among them. Not quickly, not slowly. You listen. You let a few senators believe their whispers hold sway. You let others believe they are ignored. Both are illusions, but useful ones. Then come the games. The games are not for you, but they are because of you. You do not plan them. You do not train the gladiators, nor tame the beasts, but every coin spent, every banner flown, and every cheer shouted echoes back toward your name. The people do not care who arrange the seating or set the order of events. They care that you are there, that you wave, that you smile, that your thumb held high or low can bend fate. You arrive late, deliberately. The arena is already full. The crowd swells as word spreads that the emperor has arrived. Banners rise, horns sound, voices shout your name, not because they know you, not because they love you, but because they need you. You are the axis on which their world turns. The seats reserved for you stand apart, raised high, and draped in purple. You climb the steps slowly, giving the people time to see. The sun shines on your shoulders. You lift a hand. 100 voices answer. You do not smile widely. You never do. A subtle nod is enough. Below, the sand is already stained. Two gladiators circle each other with careful steps. The crowd roars, not for blood, but for theatre. They know how the games work. They know the difference between real skill and a well-rehearsed outcome. But still, they cheer. Illusion is a comfort. You watch, not with interest, but with patience. Your presence is the real performance. At halftime, exotic animals are brought in. Lions from Africa, tigers from the east, antelope with shimmering coats. They are displayed, paraded, made symbols of conquest and wealth. The people gasp and laugh. Children shout. Vendors sell figs and flatbread. Senators lean toward you with polite observations. You nod again. A poet rises and recites verses praising your ancestors, your piety, your strength. You let him finish. You clap once. It is enough. Later, a prisoner is brought forth. The sentence is death. The crowd waits for your gesture. You do not look at the man. You look at the people. Some shout for mercy. Others demand justice. You wait. You lower your hand. The crowd cheers. You feel nothing. Not because you are cruel, but because the weight of a single life has long been lost among the millions. This is public life. This is the empire's mirror. You rise before the game's end. The departure must be as deliberate as the arrival. You move slowly again, with practiced poise. The crowd watches. Some call out. Others simply stare. When you reach your carriage, you exhale. Not relief, not exhaustion, just air held too long behind a mask. Back at the palace, the cloak of performance slips, but only slightly. You are still the emperor, even behind closed doors. The servants lower their eyes as you pass. The guards stand straighter. Even the dogs fall silent when your footsteps approach. You pass through the Hall of Honors, lined with statues of past emperors, each face chiseled with the same sternness, the same gravity. You wonder if your own likeness will someday be added here. You wonder what expression the sculptor will give you, and whether, centuries from now, anyone will still care. In your private chamber, scrolls await, summaries of the day's events. Reports from your handlers detail how long you stood in the forum, which senators seemed dissatisfied, who among the crowd called your name the loudest. They measure public favor with absurd precision, counting cheers, weighing applause, dissecting silence. You read it all, not because it guides you, but because it reminds you. You are always being watched, judged, not just by your enemies, but by your own people. The games, the speeches, the gestures, they are not empty. They are armor, shields against discontent, against rebellion, against history's unkind memory. At twilight, a delegation from the provinces is ushered in. Their tunics are plain, their Latin halting, but their deference is flawless. They bring olive oil and wine, bolts of dyed linen, tokens of loyalty from cities you'll never see. They kneel as they speak, each word wrapped in reverence. You kneel for no one. You thank them, not with words, but with a nod, a few well-placed sentences, a smile that feels like marble. They beam, they will return to their distant cities, with tales of your wisdom, your grace. They will say they met the emperor, and that he was divine. You eat dinner alone. A servant sets the table. Small dishes of spiced fish, stewed lentils, dates, and honeyed bread. You eat slowly. The food tastes of routine, of a life measured in obligations. You think about tomorrow. Another forum, another ceremony, another 100 eyes studying the fold of your cloak, the cadence of your breath. You think about the people, the ones who cheer, the ones who do not. the ones who wait outside your gates for judgment, for mercy, for spectacle. You are their emperor, and they are your reflection. At night, you walk once more through the courtyard. The sky above Rome is ink dark, pricked with stars. A columned arch frames the horizon. You breathe in the quiet, not peace, but the absence of noise. You remember the words of your tutor. Power is not seen in what you do, but in how still you remain when all expect motion. You stop walking. You stand still. For a moment, there is no emperor, no games, no forum, no performance, just a man in sandals beneath the stars, trying to remember who he was before the world asked him to become more. Later in the evening, a playwright visits the palace. Not a senator, not a general, just a man with ink on his hands and a tremor in his voice. He has been summoned to read aloud from his newest tragedy, one that, he insists, honors the glory of your reign. The room is quiet, only you, a few scribes, and the whisper of wind beyond the columns. He reads. The story is not remarkable. It is filled with predictable betrayals, with stoic deaths, with heroes undone by pride. But still, you listen. Not for the plot, but for the reflection. You wait to hear how he paints power, whether he flatters or tells the truth, whether he believes in emperors or only fears them. When he finishes, he looks to you, not for praise, but for survival. You thank him gently. You tell him his work will be copied and distributed. He breathes again. You wonder if your own life might someday become a play. If an actor, centuries from now, will wear your face and speak your words to an audience that does not remember your name. When the man leaves, you remain seated. The silence feels theatrical now, too rehearsed to be restful. You return to your study. You review the petitions once more. You draft a short speech for tomorrow's dedication ceremony, a new aqueduct to serve the northern districts. You will speak of progress, of Rome's greatness, of the empire's unity. You will not mention the laborers who died during construction, or the village displaced by the canal. You will smile, you will praise, you will wave, and the people will believe. That is the shape of public life. That is the stage from which you cannot descend, not while the empire still watches. Chapter 3. The Daily Ritual. By midday, the sun hangs high over Rome, soft but insistent, casting long, drowsy shadows across tiled rooftops and porticos. You've already endured a council meeting with the grain merchants, an affair as dry as the scrolls they carried, and taken a brief meal beneath a shaded colonnade where no one ate with their mouth open, and everyone watched to see how many bites you took. You don't remember the taste of the food, only the texture of expectation. Now the chariot waits. It's a modest vehicle, at least by imperial standards, gilded only at the trim, pulled by 2 white horses bred near the Tiber. They stamp restlessly in the sun as your escort assembles. Praetorian guards in shining segmented armor, a few advisors trying not to look nervous, and 2 scribes walking barefoot beside the wheels, clutching slates and ink. The ride to the forum is short, but nothing in Rome is truly short. Every step is watched, every gesture interpreted. Citizens line the streets. They don't cheer, not loudly, anyway. That's for triumphs and generals returning from Gaul. But they nod, they bow their heads, they murmur. A few reach out, just barely, fingertips brushing the edge of your toga, as if touching it might bring good fortune, or healing, or protection. A beggar kneels in the dust. You meet his eyes. You want to stop, but the chariot rolls forward. There is no time for mercy today. The Forum is Rome's beating heart, a vast sunlit plaza surrounded by temples, basilicas, and statues of men who died thinking they'd live forever. The air smells of dust, incense, sweat, and citrus oil. You can already hear the crowd restless, not angry, but not entirely calm either. These are not the elite, the polished senatorial class. These are merchants, bakers, soldiers on leave, women in worn sandals, and children who've never seen the emperor up close before. You dismount. Your feet touch the stone, warm from the sun. A hush falls. Not complete silence, but the kind of pause that ripples through a body of people like wind through wheat. You ascend the steps of the rostra, a stone platform from which emperors and senators have addressed the public for generations. A scribe hands you the speech. You do not look at it. You already know what it says. Or rather, you know what it's supposed to say. You may not have written it, but your silence shaped every word. You begin. The speech is not loud. You speak slowly, calmly. You do not shout. Emperors do not shout. The crowd leans in to hear you, to feel the rhythm of your voice. You speak of stability, of grain shipments arriving safely, of loyalty in the provinces, of tax relief, of gods who smile upon a well-governed people. You do not lie, but you do not tell the full truth either. You do not mention the soldiers near the Rhine grumbling about late pay. You do not mention the rumor that your cousin might be plotting from Alexandria. You do not mention that last night you dreamt of your father again, and he did not look pleased. Instead, you promise, not grand promises. Rome is tired of those, but small ones. More bread, fewer levies, a repaired aqueduct near the southern wall, a day of public games in the amphitheater to honor the gods of health and healing. The crowd begins to nod, slowly. One man claps, then another. Soon the applause spreads, not thunderous but steady. Enough. You let it settle. Then step down. You do not linger. Emperors who linger become targets. And besides, the sun is hot, and your sandals are starting to rub the wrong way. Your guards fall in around you as you walk back to the chariot. You do not look back, but you listen. To the voices that follow you, to the names whispered in admiration, and the ones not spoken aloud. Back at the palace, your return is met with no fanfare, no music, just the sound of your footsteps and the soft greeting of a servant who bows so low you worry he might not get up again. You nod, but say nothing. Words are heavy when spoken by an emperor. They're best rationed, like gold. You retreat to the peristyle garden for a moment of silence. Vines climb the columns. A small fountain murmurs endlessly, its water clear and cold, splashing over marble lips worn smooth by centuries of use. You dip your fingers in it, not to drink, just to feel something that doesn't need you. The garden is perhaps the only place in the palace that does not ask anything of you, not today. The afternoon air is warm, cicadas buzz faintly. You sit on the stone bench, eyes closed. For a moment you forget about scrolls and Senate politics. You try not to think about how many spies are stationed among your staff, or which advisor has been quieter than usual. Instead, you let the scent of crushed mint and fresh laurel fill your lungs. A shadow falls across your face. It's your steward, respectful, quiet, always just close enough to speak if you permit it. He says your next audience is ready. The governor of Sicilia has arrived early. You rise. Duty. Again. You walk slowly through the corridor, the stone cool beneath your sandals. Another official, another series of requests hidden behind compliments. He needs grain exports increased, or a loan forgiven, or a rival watched. You listen. You nod. You smile when appropriate. You do not promise. Emperors do not promise lightly. There are brief moments between the words, between the nods, when you notice the governor's eyes flicker, a flash of envy, a pulse of calculation. You've seen it before. Power recognizes power, even when it masks itself as loyalty. When the audience ends, you remain seated for a time. Your body is upright, but your mind drifts. You think about the forum, the faces in the crowd, the boy with dirt on his cheek who clapped a heartbeat too late, the woman holding a child who stared at you as if trying to decide whether you were real. You wonder how long they'll remember this day. Then your aide returns. He carries a wax tablet. Messages, always more messages. There's news from the frontier. A minor rebellion suppressed in Dacia, a tribute shipment delayed from Carthage, a temple collapsed in an earthquake near Corinth. You absorb the information silently, eyes scanning without reading. Some items will need action, most will not. The empire, for all its grandeur, is self-correcting. Like a river, it finds a way to flow around whatever obstacles arise, unless you try to dam it with your will. You hand back the tablet. A bell tolls softly in the courtyard. Not for you, for the hour. Time moves, even when emperors do not. Your thoughts return to the speech. Not what you said, but what you didn't. You wonder if the people heard your silence, if they noticed how your voice faltered slightly when you mentioned the gods, or how you glanced just once toward the horizon, toward the sea, toward the place where every emperor looks eventually, wondering if perhaps somewhere out there life is simpler. But you know better. There is no simpler life. Not for you. Not anymore. As you prepare for the next meeting, another senator, another grievance, another round of veiled threats dressed as praise, you remind yourself of one simple truth. You chose this. Or perhaps it chose you. But either way, you wear the purple. And the fabric doesn't get any lighter. As the sun begins its slow descent behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of dusty orange and soft plum, your day continues. The corridors remain busy. More faces arrive. The head of the aqueduct works, seeks funds to repair a collapsed bridge. A philosopher requests an audience to discuss stoic interpretations of imperial justice. You listen, you nod, you absorb their words like dry earth drinking rain, but you offer very little in return. The truth is, you're tired. But in Rome, tiredness is not a condition. It is a liability. There is no word for burnout in Latin, only for weakness, and that weakness is contagious. If you falter, others will stumble, or worse, they'll act. Power is not merely possessed, it must be projected. It must glow from your skin like oil from polished marble. There's a moment, just a flicker, where you find yourself staring out at the sky again, wondering what it's like to be anonymous, to be a man who can vanish into the countryside, tend vines, rise with the dawn, not because of obligation, but because of light. But then someone clears their throat beside you, and the vision is gone. An update from the archives arrives, a report on tax collection in Hispania, with figures so carefully inflated they might float. The officials have grown creative, using poetic terms to describe shortages, like anticipated bounty deferred. You sigh inwardly. You'll send a letter later, carefully worded, gentle but firm. Evening approaches. The palace begins to dim. Torches are lit, casting flickering shadows across painted walls. A servant lights the bronze lamp near your desk. The flame steady, yellow, calm. You rest your eyes for a moment and allow yourself to breathe. Not deeply, not freely, but enough. Dinner is quiet, not silent. Too many attendants for that, but quiet enough to allow your thoughts to move unguarded. You eat slowly, roast lamb with herbs, lentils again, a fig perfectly ripe. The wine is diluted, as is custom. A musician plucks soft chords in the atrium. No one speaks unless you do. You don't. You think of the boy who once stood outside this palace, looking in, dreaming of thrones and marble and a name carved in stone. You wonder what that boy would say now. Probably nothing, because that boy no longer exists. You finish the meal and stand, slowly, with care. The guards outside your chambers nod as you pass. One yawns and quickly hides it. Another adjusts his grip on the spear. You return to your private study for a final review. One more scroll, one more signature, one more decree. A small matter, land redistribution in a distant province. You approve it, you think it's fair, but you also know it will make one powerful family very unhappy. You extinguish the lamp. The day is over, and tomorrow waits, with its speeches and messages and masks. But for now, in this single moment, you are no longer the emperor. You are simply a man in a robe, walking down a darkened corridor toward the only room where your name is not spoken. Sleep waits, but not quite yet. Not until the dreams are done with you. In your chamber, the candles flicker low, casting shadows on the coffered ceiling, like the drifting thoughts behind your eyes. You sit on the edge of your bed, robe loosened, the air cooler now but not yet restful. A servant brings a scroll, another report. You wave it away. The day has made its case. You remove the signet ring. Place it on the small marble dish near the basin. The band is warm from your skin, and for a moment it looks harmless, as if it has never sealed an execution order, as if it were just gold. A breeze stirs the curtain. Outside, the sounds of Rome fade into a low hum. Even the city rests, if only briefly. Somewhere beyond the walls, a mother sings to a child. Somewhere else, an oil lamp is extinguished. You lie back. The bed is too soft, or perhaps you are too tense. You don't remember when sleep last came quickly, but tonight you try. You close your eyes. You breathe. The palace fades. The faces fade. The voices grow distant. In the quiet, you are not emperor, not ruler, not even man. Just breath. Just bones. Just dreams. Chapter 4. The burden of decision-making. Morning breaks again, not with brilliance but with routine. The sunlight filters in through the shutters, not golden and grand, but pale and practiced, like a servant who knows better than to draw attention. You rise before the city fully wakes, as you always do, not from eagerness, but necessity. In the antechamber, the scribes are already waiting. Their scrolls are stacked in neat bundles, tied with simple cord. They bow, speak softly, and begin to outline the decisions that await your seal. Some are trivial: requests for land inspections, a new market license, minor disputes between traders in the Sabora, but others carry weight, the kind of weight you can feel in your jaw, your shoulders, your spine. A governor in Mosea wants approval to fortify a border town. A senator asks for a quiet pardon for his son's involvement in a bribery scandal. The high priest of Vesta insists on an increased budget for temple repairs, invoking divine disfavor as leverage. These are not decisions, you think. They are calculations with no clean sum. You move through each matter slowly. Some decisions are postponed, others are signed without ceremony. You delegate where you can, but not too much. An emperor who delegates too freely risks seeming absent. An emperor who does not delegate at all risks suffocation. You've learnt this balance over time. It's a rhythm now, a kind of imperial breathing. As the day deepens, the questions become heavier. Your advisors gather for the second council of the week. You sit at the head of the chamber beneath the frescoed dome, while they stand or sit below, arranged not by merit, but by age and proximity to power. A military tribune presents intelligence from the north. The Germanic tribes are restless again. A supply route has been disrupted. Fortresses near the Danube report shortages. The general in charge requests reinforcements. You do not question his report, but you do question his motives. You know how eager some men are for new command, new glory. You ask questions, not harshly, but precisely. You learn quickly who has read the reports and who has merely skimmed. One advisor shifts uncomfortably. Another tries to redirect the conversation towards civic works. You let him speak, but you remember. Later, in the privacy of your study, you consider the proposals again. Reinforcements mean more soldiers pulled from secure areas. It means gold. It means a message to your enemies that Rome is bracing for something. And perhaps worse, it sends a message to your allies that you may not be in control. You look out the window. The rooftops are still. The Tiber winds in the distance, slow and wide. You could choose not to send them, save the coin, preserve the illusion of calm. But illusions are fragile, and if a single town falls, they will blame you for seeing the smoke and choosing not to move. So you write the order, a small legion, quietly deployed. You'll cut elsewhere. The decision is made, but the weight remains. The day stretches on. The weight of earlier decisions clings to you like damp cloth, not overwhelming but never loosening. In the Hall of Echoes, where sound drifts slowly and returns as whispers, you meet with your legal scholars. A dispute has arisen between two prominent patrician houses. One accuses the other of encroaching on ancestral land. They bring evidence, witnesses, and generations of quiet hatred. You listen. Not because you care for the details, they are numerous and contradictory, but because how you rule will shape how they see the law. You are not just the judge, you are the law itself. What you decide here will ripple outward, far beyond these two houses. You rule in favor of the claimant whose documents were slightly more complete. You speak slowly, your voice even. You explain the decision. One man bows, the other clenches his jaw and bows lower. Both leave in silence. You know the matter is not finished. It never is. There are pauses in the day, brief ones. You take a short walk through the gardens again. The olive trees sway in the breeze. You trail your fingers along a low stone wall, mossy and cool to the touch. In the distance, a child laughs. You wonder if it's the son of one of your stewards, playing where he should not be seen. You allow it. Small moments of life should go undisturbed. You return to your chambers. Another report waits. A petition from the eastern provinces. They ask for reduced tributes due to a poor harvest. You read it carefully. You know their words are genuine, but you also know the treasury is not deep. Every remission means tightening somewhere else. You approve half the request. A compromise no one will like, but both can survive. In the evening, you meet with your physicians. Not for your health. They know better than to raise concerns unless summoned, but to review provisions for the hospitals. A plague has broken out near the southern ports. Mild, they say. Contained, they say. But they also said that last time you authorize additional grain for the affected regions. You request updates daily. The day darkens. Lamps glow along the corridors once again. You sit by your writing desk, not to write, but to think. The decisions are not done, but the scrolls have run out. What remains are not matters of state, but of soul. Should you marry again? Should you name a successor? Should you begin the reforms your father feared? You do not answer. Not tonight. You sit in silence, the fire crackling gently, the city breathing far below. And somewhere deep inside you, the questions remain, not as burdens, but as companions. Always waiting, always watching. Night has fully embraced the city, cloaking its streets in soft quiet and golden oil light. You remain in your chamber, still dressed in your day robes, not ready for sleep, not ready to stop. The weight of power does not obey the setting sun. It lingers in the bones, in the breath, in the unspoken hours between night and morning. You rise and walk slowly to the map chamber. There, unrolled before you, are the provinces of your empire, etched in ink and blood. Hispania, Gallia, Syria, Aegyptus, Thracia, names you've never stepped foot in, yet are yours to govern. Dots and lines that dictate millions of lives. Roads and rivers that mean taxes, trade, resistance and rebellion. Your eyes settle on a small province in the Far East. Quiet, stable, but recently afflicted by flooding. The news hadn't reached most of the court yet. It came to you first, in a sealed letter marked urgent. The governor reports displacement, famine, illness. You think of the cost. Sending grain there means withholding it somewhere else. You already promised extra stores to the southern ports, but this eastern province is more vulnerable, less visible. If they suffer, no one will notice. No one but you. You send the grain. You make a note to meet with your treasurer. He will frown. He always frowns. But he will find a way. You extinguish one lamp, then another. The flames die without protest. The quiet thickens. You move through the halls slowly now. The stillness welcomes you. For the first time today, there are no voices, no footsteps behind yours, no glances trailing your wake. Inside your private sanctum, you pause. Here, the walls are bare, no statues, no tapestries, just a single scroll, mounted carefully behind a glass case. Your father's hand, his writing, his last decree. You've read it so many times you no longer see the words, just the shape of his thoughts. He had ruled for years with firmness and fire. You rule with silence and slow stone. Different methods, same burden. You sit and reread the scroll, not because it has changed, but because you have. Each time you read it, it reflects a different version of you. Tonight, it reflects fatigue. Tomorrow, perhaps duty. You close your eyes and breathe. These decisions, they do not end. You know this. You've known since the purple robe first graced your shoulders. Being emperor is not about the victories or the festivals or the forum statues. It is about this, the unending necessity of judgment. The need to decide when no decision feels right, when no answer is kind, when every path is paved with noise. You rise, you do not linger. There is a final report on your desk. You read it. And then, you sleep. Not because the day is done, but because the next one waits. The moon has climbed higher now, casting silver shadows through the lattice work above your chamber. You sit again, this time not to rule, not to read, but to simply exist. The chair creaks faintly beneath you. An old sound, a familiar one. The palace is quiet, but your mind is not. You think of everything left unsaid. There was a message from Alexandria you didn't answer. A scholar petitioning for funds to rebuild part of the library. You agreed with him. In principle. But principles don't fund legions or feed the poor. Still, you left it marked to revisit. You will decide later. You remember a letter from your sister. She asked about a minor appointment in one of the coastal towns. Her words were gentle, but her meaning was not. You haven't responded yet. Not because you don't care, but because you do. Family complicates judgment, and emperors must never appear to bend for blood. You run your thumb over the wax of an unbroken seal. Tomorrow's decisions already await you. You stand at last, not to retreat, but to yield for a few hours to a place where no judgment is required, where the weight lifts for a time. You step into your sleeping chamber. The linens are fresh, the fire has been banked low, a servant has placed a small bowl of almonds beside the bed, as they always do. You don't remember when that began. You lie down, fully aware that sleep is not a promise, only a possibility. But in this moment, there is no forum, no senate, no map, no seal, just the slow, steady breath of a man who ruled as best he could, and the quiet return of night. Chapter 5. The Games and the People. The games were the great heartbeat of Roman public life. They were not mere entertainment, they were ritual, tradition, power wrapped in pageantry. As emperor, you do not simply attend the games, you embody them. Your presence is their legitimacy. They begin long before the first shout, the first clash of blade on shield. They begin with planning, months in advance. Scribes draft invitations, architects inspect the stone tiers of the amphitheaters, trainers prepare animals and men alike, and behind it all, a quiet stream of gold flows. Contracts signed, bribes paid, shipments of exotic beasts unloaded in the port under cover of night. You are informed of each detail, though rarely do you intervene. Your signature appears on the final parchment, and that is enough. The people will believe the emperor himself chose the leopards, that he reviewed the gladiators, that he arranged every flourish, and perhaps in a way you did, because you allowed it to happen in your name. The Colosseum is a monument, not just of stone, but of memory. Its walls have heard centuries of screams, joy, and terror braided together. On the day of the games, you approach it not as a spectator, but as its axis. The imperial box stands tall above the arena, draped in purple cloth, guarded by elite soldiers. As you ascend to your seat, tens of thousands watch. Some stand, some chant, some fall silent. It is not you they look upon, but the role you inhabit, the godlike figure who rules not only laws, but moments like this. The games begin with fanfare. Musicians line the entrances, and processions of animals march forth. Elephants adorned in gold-painted cloth, panthers led by chains of bronze, birds of every color bursting from cages into the open air. Then come the gladiators. They march in pairs or groups, each in distinct armor. Thracians with curved blades, Myrmilones with fish-crested helmets, Retiari with nets and tridents. They salute you with practiced solemnity. You do not rise, you do not wave, you simply incline your head. That is enough. The matches begin with a rhythm as old as empire. Each clash is not simply combat, it is story. The crowd knows this. They cheer not just for violence, but for the unfolding of a tale they've seen 100 times, and yet still crave again. There is rhythm in it, a script without words, a dance of blood and grit. You watch from above, your face unreadable. A victor kneels, waiting for your sign. Sometimes you spare him. Sometimes you do not. The crowd may scream their will, but it is your gesture that seals his fate, and so they watch you, just as much as they watch the sand below. Later, a mock naval battle is staged. The arena is flooded, and small ships row into position. Slaves disguised as pirates, prisoners dressed as sailors. They crash into each other with wooden oars and shouts rehearsed a dozen times. It is absurd. It is glorious. It is Rome. Children in the crowd scream with delight. Vendors pass roasted chickpeas, honey cakes, wine in clay cups. The smell of sweat and citrus and dust fills the air. It is more than spectacle. It is communion. For a few hours, the empire feels whole. For a few hours, everyone believes. By mid-afternoon, the sun casts long shadows across the stone seats. You remain seated, still and composed. The games continue, but your mind begins to drift, not out of boredom, but into memory. You remember your first games. You remember when the emperor was someone else. You remember the awe, the fear, the trembling joy of simply being present. And now, you are the one they watch. You do not feel awe anymore, only wait. In the quieter moments between bouts, your thoughts turn to the crowd itself. Tens of thousands of citizens fill the tiers. Men, women, children, senators, beggars, freedmen, soldiers, all gathered beneath the same sun, all focused on the same stage. In this one place, the illusion of equality thrives. The arena is the only space in the empire where class fades. if only for a while. They cheer the same strikes, they groan at the same wounds, they throw the same flowers onto the sand. The rich sit in shaded boxes, the poor sweat on stone benches, but all their voices rise in one rhythm, and all of them, highborn or low, look to you for approval. They want to know where you look, when you nod, if you smile. You know this, and you use it. To sit in silence is a message. To lift your cup is a blessing. To stand is a command. You did not ask for this role, but now you must perform it with the grace expected of divinity. And so you do. The games stretch into the evening, torches are lit, the air thickens with smoke and incense. The final events are the grandest trained beasts pitted against champions, chariots racing in narrow lanes of sand, theatrical executions of criminals dressed as mythic villains. Blood and theatre become indistinguishable. The crowd is louder now, drunk on excitement, sun and wine, and still you sit, poised and composed. Not out of strength, but necessity, because the emperor cannot flinch. He cannot look away. You think, sometimes, of the gladiators, not as warriors, but as symbols. Most are slaves, some are prisoners, a few are volunteers, drawn by coin, or fame, or desperation. They are trained in schools, housed in barracks, their bodies molded into instruments of performance. You met one once, years ago, in private. A quiet man, small for a fighter, with scars like a map across his back. He spoke with reverence for the arena, not for its blood, but for its clarity. In there, he said, there is no lie, only skill and death and sometimes mercy. You remembered his words long after his name faded. Now, when the gate opens and a new pair enters, you wonder if they speak similar truths to each other before the fight begins, if they know this is their moment of meaning, if they whisper prayers to Mars or to no one at all. The arena becomes a mirror. It reflects courage, cruelty, resolve. It reflects you, because you are not separate from the games. You are their origin, their purpose, their justification. Every death echoes your authority. Every cheer reaffirms your presence. And yet there is loneliness in it. You sit surrounded by sound, but no voice reaches you honestly. You are both the most seen and the least known. They do not cheer for your soul. They cheer for the silhouette of your station. You sip watered wine. You nod at your advisors. You respond to none of it. Not out of arrogance, out of weariness. As dusk settles over Rome, the games begin to slow. The crowd remains lively, but the noise is softer now. Less a roar, more a hum. The final gladiators perform with weary grace. The sand is soaked with sweat, streaked with red, trampled into a kind of mosaic only the arena understands. You descend from your seat slowly, as ceremony dictates. The crowd watches. You offer no speech, no flourish. Your silence is its own kind of performance. The people cheer as you leave, and though you do not smile, you feel their warmth press against your back like a tide. It is not affection, it is recognition. You are Rome to them. Not a man, but a monument. Back inside the palace, a servant wipes the dust from your sandals. Another brings a damp cloth for your hands. You ask for water, then sit in a shaded corridor that overlooks the city. The torches of the Colosseum still flicker in the distance. Echoes of laughter and song drift from nearby taverns. For the people, the night is still young. For you, it has already ended. You are tired, not of blood or duty, but of the mask. The emperor does not grieve publicly. He does not flinch. He does not tire. He does not age. And yet you feel all of those things as you sit alone in a corridor that smells faintly of rose oil and parchment. A senator's son will be married tomorrow. You must attend. A new law about land distribution requires your approval. A foreign envoy seeks audience next week, and in 3 days more games will begin. This time honoring a harvest festival. You will sit again in the imperial box. You will nod. You will watch. You will not be seen. And so, the games continue. Not because Rome demands them, but because you do. Because in their pageantry, you are reminded, however faintly, of power's fragile theatre. That all empires, even the greatest ones, survive not only by force, but by belief. And as long as they believe in you, the show will go on. Later that evening, in the privacy of your study, a scribe brings records of the day's expenses, the cost of beasts, the payment for musicians, the price of oil for the torches. You glance through the parchment, then set it aside. The figures are immense, yet no one will question them. The games are priceless because they purchase loyalty, silence, stability. A breeze slips through the open window. From here, the Colosseum is a distant outline against the darkening sky. You wonder if the sand has already been swept clean, if the cages are being wheeled away, if the silence that follows such noise feels as jarring to others as it does to you. A servant asks if you wish to bathe. You nod, not because you crave the water, but because routine comforts. As the warm water envelops you, you close your eyes. You do not think of politics, or of senators, or of treaties. You think of a child in the crowd, somewhere near the lower tier, eyes wide with wonder. You remember being that child, long before the crown, before the purple robes, before the burdens. You wonder if that child would recognize the man you've become. You wonder if he would be proud. When you leave the bath, you feel lighter, not cleansed, not renewed, but steadied. The way a monument must be steady, the way an emperor must be. As you prepare for rest, you glance once more toward the city. Cloaked in torchlight and shadow, Rome sleeps fitfully. It dreams in fragments, in blood and coin and spectacle. And tomorrow, it will wake to your name. You lie in your chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow. Sleep will come, though not quickly. Your mind replays the roar of the crowd, the shimmer of blades, the flicker of torches. These memories do not disturb you, but they do not soothe you either. They are simply there. You think of the countless emperors before you who sat in that same box, watched those same games, bore those same masks. Some are remembered as tyrants, some as visionaries, most are dust, spoken of only by historians and statues. You wonder which you will be. You wonder who writes the stories. And you wonder quietly, deeply, if anyone ever truly rules Rome, or if the empire, like the games, continues on its own momentum, with each emperor only pretending to steer. A soft knock at the door, a final report. You do not answer. You do not need to. They will leave it at the threshold. In the stillness of night, Rome hums outside your walls. And you, the emperor, are alone with your thoughts, crowned not just in gold, but in silence. Chapter 6. The Politics of Survival. By sunrise, the pageantry has faded. What remains is the machinery of rule, constant, unyielding, and cold. As emperor, your days are shaped less by glory than by calculation. Each morning begins not with inspiration, but with information. Reports from provinces, petitions from nobles, intercepted letters, whispers carried by spies. These arrive before your first meal, before your first sip of water. They are the breath of the empire, filtered through parchment and protocol. You sit at the long marble table in your private chamber of council. Around you are men of various tempers, senators, secretaries, advisors. Some you trust, most you watch. They speak in layers, every word polished, every compliment sharpened by a hidden edge. Politics in Rome is never spoken plainly, it is danced. Today, the governor of Hispania is accused of hoarding grain. A popular general sends word of his campaign's success near the Danube and an undertone of independence. A wealthy merchant has been arrested for spreading a seditious play. Each case requires response, judgment, but more than that, it requires you to consider how each answer echoes into the web of loyalty and resentment that sustains your rule. You say little, you ask questions, you nod slowly. This is your performance now, not arena, not temple, court. You are not fooled by ceremony. The toga does not hide ambition. The bowl does not erase treachery. You have lived too long inside this cage of velvet to mistake it for anything else. Power in Rome is not held. It is borrowed on the edge of fear and favor. You know this better than most. You have seen what happens to emperors who forget. Behind every senator's smile, there are alliances. Within every province, quiet loyalties bend toward fortune. The moment you appear weak, hesitant, indecisive, aging, those loyalties begin to tilt. Not out of malice, out of instinct. Rome does not forgive vulnerability, so you cultivate strength, not always in truth, but always in appearance. You are careful with your silences, measured in your nods. You reward loyalty visibly. You punish betrayal with theatre. Once, a consul whispered dissent too freely at a banquet. By morning, he had been invited to govern a distant outpost in Mauritania. Another, bolder still, hinted at your declining health. The next day, his private letters were read aloud in the Senate. Treasonous, seditious, he vanished. You did not need to raise your voice. Your silence was enough. That is the real art of survival in Rome. To act without seeming to act. To command without appearing cruel. The empire does not love strong men. It fears them, and it does not fear tyrants. It replaces them, but it believes in balance, and so you walk that narrow line. Too much mercy, and they circle you. Too much iron, and they destroy you. Each day is a negotiation with shadows. Later, you walk through the palace gardens, accompanied by only one guard. This is your ritual, not for pleasure, but for thought. The gardens are quiet, away from scrolls and politics and masks. Olive trees lean under the weight of fruit. A fountain murmurs softly in the distance. Marble statues of long-dead ancestors line the path, their faces smooth and cold. Here, you do not need to speak, but even in silence, your mind is restless. You think of the balance you must strike between senate and soldier, between law and instinct, between the gods and the gossip. Every decision you make ripples outward, through letters, through merchants, through rumors passed in bathhouses and markets. You are not always certain. No emperor ever is. But you must always seem certain. A single pause in judgment can unravel years of loyalty. A frown misread can spark fear or challenge. Even illness must be hidden, wrapped in layers of ceremony and divine language. To falter in public is to invite ambition from others. And ambition in Rome is never idle. You once admired the Republic's ideals, debate, reason, shared governance, but those ideals crumble in practice, bent by hunger and pride. You've seen senators stall reforms for bribes, generals betray promises for titles. Even the philosophers, those who speak most of virtue, angle for patronage behind closed doors. So you do not govern with purity. You govern with clarity. You see the world as it is, not as it ought to be. In the afternoon, you attend a small council. The subject is grain, its supply, its storage, and the quiet threat of unrest if shipments falter. The Tiber has flooded recently. Warehouses have spoiled. Word has reached you that in certain districts bread is thinning, tempers are rising. You listen, hands folded. One advisor suggests stricter rationing. Another proposes higher tariffs on imports. A third recommends distributing free grain to the masses for a week, a gesture of imperial generosity. You nod at the third, not because you agree with him, but because the people must eat, and more importantly, they must eat in your name. Bread is not simply sustenance in Rome. It is a message, a symbol of stability. When the people receive it, they remember who gave it. They remember who gave it. They tell stories of your mercy, your foresight, your divine favor. That memory buys time, buys peace. And so you give the order, free grain for 7 days, and a public announcement to follow. It will speak not of shortages, but of your benevolence. The people must never see the fear behind your gifts. That too is the politics of survival, knowing when to offer softness as a shield. Later, in a private room, you speak with a trusted general. He has returned from the border, bearing maps and names. His voice is low, his tone is cautious. There are whispers, he says, of a rebellion in the east. You say nothing, but you begin to plan. That night, as the palace quiets and lamps burn low, you sit alone in your study, reviewing correspondence. The script is familiar, provinces pleading for coin, nobles seeking favor, generals reporting loyalty, veiled in pride. One letter stands out. It is unsigned, written in a practiced hand. It warns of a senator's secret meeting. A name is mentioned. A date. You close the scroll slowly. There is no shock, only confirmation. You've learned not to be surprised. Ambition, like ivy, always climbs where power stands still. You seal the scroll again, not with alarm, but with intention. A note will be sent to the senator, an invitation, a quiet supper, a discussion of roads and laws and legacy. Nothing more. You will smile. You will listen. You will offer him a small role, perhaps, just enough to bind him closer, or perhaps you will do nothing at all. Just let him wonder if you know. Doubt, after all, is more useful than proof. Outside your chamber, Rome breathes. Torches flicker against marble. The Empire does not sleep. It waits, watches, whispers. You rise. You set the scroll aside. And with steady steps, you walk through the silence, not as a man, but as the Empire's center. The weight of rule is not always loud. Sometimes, it is just the sound of your own footsteps, echoing through a corridor lined with portraits of those who wore the crown before you. Your attendant approaches with the quiet efficiency that marks all palace servants, carrying a bronze basin filled with warm water that steams gently in the cool morning air. The water has been heated to exactly the right temperature, tested by 3 different people before it reached your room, because serving the Emperor water that is too hot or too cold is the kind of mistake that can end careers or lives. Behind him, more servants file in silently, each carrying items essential to the imperial morning routine. One holds a silver tray with various oils and unguents, their surfaces gleaming in the soft light filtering through the high windows. Another carries towels of the finest linen, woven so perfectly they feel like silk against the skin. A third holds your morning garments, including the purple toga that marks your imperial status, dyed with murex shells gathered from distant shores at enormous expense. The morning bath ritual begins with olive oil, the golden liquid that serves as soap, perfume, and skin treatment all in one. A slave, specially trained in this task, begins to massage the oil into your skin with practiced movements, working it into your shoulders, your arms, your chest. The oil is warm and fragrant, scented with herbs brought from across the Empire, but you barely notice its luxury because this is just another part of the routine that defines your existence. While one slave tends to your body, another prepares the implements for your morning shave. The bronze razor is sharp enough to cut through the toughest beard, but delicate enough to navigate the sensitive skin of your face without leaving scars. The blade has been tested on a practice surface, sharpened to perfection, and examined for any flaws that might nick the imperial skin. The slave who will wield this razor has years of training and a steady hand, because shaving the emperor is a task that requires absolute precision. As the oil is worked into your skin, a secretary enters quietly and takes his position in the corner of the room. He carries a scroll containing the morning reports, updates from across the empire that arrive during the night. While you are being bathed and groomed, he will read these reports aloud in a calm, measured voice, transforming your morning routine into a briefing session that keeps you informed about the state of your vast dominions. The reports begin with the mundane but essential details of imperial administration. Grain shipments from Egypt have arrived on schedule, ensuring that the people of Rome will have bread for another month. Tax collections in Gaul are proceeding normally, with only minor complaints from local governors about the efficiency of their collectors. Road construction in Britannia continues despite unseasonable weather, though progress is slower than originally projected. While these reports drone on in the background, the bathing process continues with methodical thoroughness. After the olive oil comes the strigil, a curved bronze tool used to scrape away the oil along with the dirt and dead skin it has loosened. The scraping process is oddly soothing, a rhythmic scratching sound that blends with the secretary's voice as he moves through reports about bridge repairs in Germania and lighthouse maintenance in Alexandria. Next comes the rinse, using water that has been heated in the palace furnaces and carried up several flights of stairs by slaves whose only job is to ensure that the emperor's bath water is always perfect. The water cascades over your shoulders, washing away the last traces of oil and leaving your skin clean and tingling from the morning chill that never quite leaves the marble chambers of the palace. The shaving process begins while you're still damp from the rinse, your skin soft and prepared for the bronze blade. The slave barber works with intense concentration, starting with your cheeks and working methodically across your face, pausing occasionally to wipe the blade clean on a specially prepared cloth. Each stroke of the razor is deliberate and careful, because a slip here could leave a scar that would be visible to every person who looks at you for the rest of your reign. During the shaving, the secretary continues his reports, his voice a steady drone that requires no response from you. Pirates have been spotted off the coast of Sicily, but pose no immediate threat to shipping. A minor earthquake in Asia Minor caused some damage to a temple, but no loss of life. A dispute between two cities over water rights has been resolved by the local governor without requiring imperial intervention. The morning grooming continues with the application of various oils and perfumes, each selected for specific purposes. Oil for your hair, scented with expensive aromatics that will ensure you smell appropriately imperial throughout the day. Oil for your hands, to keep the skin soft despite the constant handling of papyrus and bronze implements. Oil for your face, to protect against the drying effects of spending long hours in marble halls with limited natural moisture. While these finishing touches are applied, attention turns to your morning attire. The purple toga, the ultimate symbol of imperial authority, is carefully examined for any flaws, stains, or imperfections that might diminish its impact. The garment is enormous, requiring multiple people to drape it properly across your body, with each fold precisely positioned to create the flowing, majestic silhouette that Romans expect from their emperor. Underneath the toga goes a simple tunic, white linen that serves as a base layer and helps the outer garment hang properly. The tunic is secured with a belt of leather and gold, functional but beautiful, designed to support the weight of the toga without creating uncomfortable bunching or pulling. Your sandals are brought forward, leather straps that have been oiled and polished until they gleam, buckles of bronze that have been buffed to mirror brightness. The dressing process requires the coordination of several people, each responsible for a different aspect of your appearance. One person holds the toga, while another arranges the folds, a third secures the belt, and a fourth ensures that your sandals are properly fastened. The entire process is choreographed like a dance, with each participant knowing exactly when to move, what to do, and how to avoid interfering with the others. As the final touches are applied to your appearance, the secretary concludes his morning reports with items that require your attention during the day. A delegation from a client kingdom wishes an audience to discuss tribute payments. Several legal cases await your judgment, including a dispute over inheritance that has been working its way through the courts for months. A new aqueduct project requires imperial approval before construction can begin. The morning routine concludes with a brief inspection in a polished bronze mirror, held at just the right angle to show you your reflection. You see the face of the Roman emperor, clean-shaven and properly groomed, wearing the purple toga that transforms you from a private individual into a public institution. The transformation is complete, but underneath the imperial facade, you're still the same person who woke up tired and uncomfortable in an expensive bed, wondering if today might be the day someone finally succeeds in killing you. 3. A schedule fit for a god king. Your morning meal awaits in a chamber adjacent to your bedroom, arranged on a low table surrounded by couches upholstered in silk from distant China. The breakfast is light by necessity because the day ahead will be long and demanding, filled with activities that require mental clarity and physical endurance. Heavy meals make for sluggish thinking, and an emperor cannot afford to be sluggish when every decision might affect millions of people across the known world. The food itself is simple but perfect. Bread baked from the finest wheat, still warm from the palace ovens, and soft enough to tear easily with your fingers. Fresh fruit brought from the imperial gardens, selected for ripeness and arranged artfully on silver platters. Honey from hives maintained specifically for the imperial table, golden and fragrant with the scent of Roman wildflowers. Wine mixed with water in the proper proportions, neither too strong to cloud judgment, nor too weak to provide the minor stimulation needed to face the day ahead. While you eat, your secretary continues reading from his scrolls, transitioning from the overnight reports to the day's scheduled activities. The morning hours will be devoted to administrative matters, the routine business of governing an empire that spans 3 continents and includes dozens of provinces, hundreds of cities, and millions of subjects. Legal cases that require imperial judgment, appeals from lower courts that have reached the highest level of the Roman justice system. The first case involves a dispute over water rights between 2 cities in Asia Minor, a disagreement that has been simmering for years and has finally escalated to the point where only imperial intervention can resolve it. Both cities claim historical precedent for their position, both have submitted extensive documentation supporting their claims, and both are politically important enough that your decision will have implications far beyond the immediate dispute. After the water rights case comes a property dispute from Gaul, involving a Roman citizen who claims that local magistrates have illegally confiscated his land. The case has been complicated by accusations of bribery, questions about the authenticity of certain documents, and the involvement of several prominent families who have business interests in the region. Your decision will not only resolve the immediate dispute, but will set a precedent for similar cases throughout the province. The third case on the morning docket involves a former soldier who is appealing his dismissal from the legions on grounds of misconduct. He claims that the charges against him were fabricated by a superior officer who wanted to eliminate a potential rival, while his accusers maintain that his actions endangered his fellow soldiers and violated the oath of military service. The case is complicated by the fact that both the accuser and the accused have distinguished service records and supporters among the military hierarchy. Between these formal legal proceedings, you will need to review and respond to correspondence from governors throughout the empire, reports on tax collection, updates on military activities, requests for guidance on local administrative matters, and recommendations for appointments to various positions. Each letter requires careful consideration because your response will guide policy across vast territories where your word is law, but your physical presence is impossible. The correspondence includes a lengthy report from the governor of Egypt, detailing the annual flood of the Nile and its implications for grain production. The flood was adequate but not exceptional this year, meaning that Egypt will meet its obligations to supply grain to Rome, but will have little surplus for emergencies or speculation. The governor recommends maintaining current grain reserves and possibly negotiating additional supplies from other provinces. From Britannia comes a request for additional troops to deal with persistent tribal unrest in the northern regions. The governor reports that current forces are adequate for defensive purposes, but insufficient for the kind of aggressive campaigning that might finally pacify the troublesome tribes. He requests 2 additional legions and authorization to recruit auxiliary forces from friendly tribes in the region. The governor of Syria writes about diplomatic developments involving the Parthian Empire, Rome's great rival to the east. Recent intelligence suggests that the Parthians are dealing with their own internal troubles, including succession disputes and rebellions in their eastern provinces. The governor recommends a cautious approach that takes advantage of Parthian weakness without provoking a military response that Rome is not currently prepared to handle. While reviewing these reports, you will also need to make decisions about appointments to various administrative positions throughout the empire. A new tax collector is needed for one of the Gallic provinces, and several candidates have been recommended by different sources. Each candidate has advantages and disadvantages, supporters and detractors, and your choice will affect not only tax collection efficiency, but also the complex web of personal relationships that determines much of imperial politics. The morning's administrative work also includes reviewing architectural plans for new public works projects in Rome itself. A new bath complex is proposed for one of the growing residential districts, designed to serve the increasing population while also providing employment for construction workers and artisans. The plans are elaborate and expensive, requiring careful consideration of both the immediate costs and the long-term benefits. Another proposed project involves expanding the harbour facilities at Ostia, Rome's port city, to accommodate the increasing volume of shipping required to supply the capital's growing population. The expansion would require significant engineering work, including dredging operations and the construction of new breakwaters, but would substantially increase the port's capacity and efficiency. Throughout these morning deliberations, you remain seated on a raised platform in your private study, surrounded by secretaries, advisors, and petitioners who wait patiently for your attention. The room is decorated with maps showing the extent of Roman territory, reminders of the vast scope of your responsibilities and the geographic scale of your decision-making authority. Each decision you make will be recorded by scribes, copied by clerks, and transmitted throughout the empire by the imperial postal system. Your judgment in the water rights case will be implemented by local magistrates in Asia Minor. Your response to the British governor's request will determine military deployments along Hadrian's Wall. Your choice of tax collector will affect revenue collection and administrative efficiency in Gaul. The weight of these decisions would be overwhelming if you allowed yourself to think about their full implications, so instead you focus on the immediate details of each case, applying established legal principles and administrative precedents to reach conclusions that seem reasonable and practical. The morning passes quickly in this routine of careful consideration and measured decision-making, the ordinary business of governing an empire that never sleeps and never stops requiring your attention. 4. The Senate, applause, or assassins. The walk to the Senate House takes you through the heart of Rome, along streets lined with marble columns and bronze statues commemorating past victories and honoring previous emperors. Your entourage moves slowly through the city, partly for ceremony and partly for security, giving the crowds time to gather and cheer, while allowing your bodyguards to scan for potential threats among the assembled faces. The people who line the streets represent the complex social hierarchy of imperial Rome. Wealthy merchants in fine togas wave enthusiastically, their prosperity dependent on the stability and expansion of Roman trade networks. Craftsmen and shopkeepers pause in their work to watch the imperial procession pass, their livelihoods connected to the broader economic health of the empire. Slaves and freedmen crane their necks for a glimpse of the emperor, their legal status entirely dependent on imperial law and custom. Your approach to the Senate House is carefully choreographed to project the right balance of imperial majesty and republican tradition. You walk rather than ride, demonstrating your connection to the Roman people while surrounded by enough guards to discourage any individual with assassination fantasies. Your pace is measured and dignified, giving onlookers time to see you clearly while ensuring that the procession maintains its scheduled timing. The Senate House itself is a monument to Roman architectural achievement and political tradition. Its marble facade, decorated with reliefs depicting great moments in Roman history. The building represents the continuity of Roman governance, housing an institution that predates the empire and has survived numerous political transformations through adaptation and compromise. Today, as on most days, it will serve as the stage for the complex dance between imperial authority and senatorial privilege. Inside the building, senators are already assembled in their designated seating, arranged according to a hierarchy that reflects both formal rank and practical political influence. Former consuls occupy the seats closest to the speaker's platform, their proximity a reminder of their distinguished service and their continuing importance in imperial administration. Behind them sit former praetors, former aediles, and other magistrates in descending order of precedence. The senators themselves represent the accumulated wealth and political experience of the Roman elite, men whose families have served the state for generations and whose personal fortunes are tied to the prosperity of the empire. They wear the broad purple stripe that marks their senatorial rank, and their togas are arranged with the casual perfection that comes from a lifetime of public appearances and political ceremonies. As you enter the chamber, the assembled senators rise as one, their movement creating a rustling sound like wind through wheat fields. The gesture is required by protocol and tradition, but the speed and enthusiasm with which they rise varies depending on the current political climate and their individual relationships with your administration. Today, the response seems appropriately respectful, neither grudging nor overly effusive. You take your place on the curule chair that has been positioned at the front of the chamber, the ivory seat that symbolizes your supreme authority while acknowledging the Senate's role in imperial governance. The chair itself is ancient, its design unchanged for centuries, connecting you to the long line of Roman magistrates who have occupied similar seats throughout the Republic and early Empire. The day's agenda begins with routine business, the administrative matters that require formal senatorial approval, even though the outcomes are rarely in doubt. A proposal to authorize new road construction in one of the Alpine provinces, funded by imperial treasury resources and managed by military engineers. The project is practical and necessary, designed to improve communication and transport in a strategically important region. Next comes a proposal to grant citizenship to a group of auxiliary soldiers who have completed their military service with distinction. The men in question are from various tribes in Germania and Gaul, warriors who served Rome faithfully for 25 years and now seek the rewards that have been promised to them. Their citizenship will make them full participants in Roman society while providing their children with opportunities for advancement within the imperial system. The third item on the agenda involves a religious matter, the authorization of funds for temple repairs in several eastern provinces. The temples in question are dedicated to traditional Roman gods, but serve communities where local deities have been syncretized with Roman religious practices. The repairs are necessary to maintain imperial prestige and demonstrate Rome's commitment to proper religious observance throughout the empire. Each proposal is presented by a designated senator who reads from prepared remarks while you listen with the appearance of careful attention. The presentations are formal and predictable, following rhetorical patterns that have been refined over generations of senatorial oratory. The speakers emphasize the practical benefits of their proposals while acknowledging the wisdom and generosity of imperial leadership. After each presentation comes the formal discussion period, when other senators may rise to offer comments, suggestions, or objections. These speeches are often more interesting than the original proposals, because they provide opportunities for individual senators to demonstrate their expertise, advance their political agendas, or simply remind their colleagues of their continuing relevance in imperial politics. Today's discussion reveals the usual range of senatorial perspectives and priorities. A senator from a maritime province emphasizes the importance of maintaining Roman naval supremacy in his comments on road construction, arguing that infrastructure improvements should be coordinated with harbor development projects. His remarks are informed by genuine expertise, but also serve to remind everyone of his province's strategic importance and his own role in maritime affairs. Another senator uses his response to the citizenship proposal to deliver a broader reflection on the benefits of Roman expansion and integration. praising the wisdom of policies that transform former enemies into loyal citizens. His speech is eloquent and well received, demonstrating the oratorical skills that have made him influential in senatorial debates, while subtly promoting his reputation as a thoughtful voice on imperial policy. The discussion of temple repairs provides an opportunity for several senators to display their knowledge of religious law and provincial administration. One speaker offers detailed information about construction costs and architectural requirements, while another discusses the diplomatic implications of imperial support for local religious practices. Their contributions are substantive and helpful, but also serve to establish their credentials as experts in their respective fields. Throughout these proceedings, you maintain the demeanor expected of an emperor addressing the Senate, attentive but not overly engaged, respectful of traditional forms, but clearly in command of the situation. Your occasional nods and gestures indicate approval or interest without committing you to specific positions before you're ready to make formal decisions. The formal votes on each proposal are foregone conclusions, with outcomes determined by prior consultation and negotiation rather than spontaneous debate. The senators vote by moving to different sections of the chamber, a physical process that makes their positions visible and public, while allowing for informal conversation and last-minute persuasion during the voting process. As the morning session concludes, you rise from your chair and prepare to leave the chamber, acknowledging the senator's respectful farewell with appropriate dignity. The morning's business has been completed successfully, with all proposals approved and no significant conflicts or controversies emerging from the discussions. Another day of imperial governance has begun, with the proper observance of traditional forms and the efficient handling of practical necessities. 5. Court intrigue, whispered plots, and pet peacocks. Returning to the palace after the morning Senate session, you enter a world where every conversation might contain hidden meanings and every gesture could be interpreted as significant. The imperial court is a complex ecosystem of ambition, loyalty, fear, and calculation, populated by individuals whose entire existence depends on their ability to navigate the treacherous currents of proximity to absolute power. Your private secretary approaches with the afternoon's correspondence, a collection of scrolls that represents the continuing flow of information and requests that characterize imperial administration. Among the routine reports and administrative documents are several messages that require more careful attention. Communications that reveal the subtle complexities of court politics and the ongoing maneuvering for imperial favor. The first message comes from one of your most trusted freedmen, a former slave who now manages significant portions of the imperial household's financial affairs. His letter is ostensibly about routine budgetary matters, requesting approval for various expenditures related to palace maintenance and staff compensation, but embedded within the financial details are coded references to more sensitive matters, information about potential security concerns and personnel issues that cannot be discussed openly. Reading between the lines of his carefully neutral prose, you learn that one of the palace guards has been spending money in ways that seem inconsistent with his official salary, raising questions about possible corruption or outside influence. The information is presented as a routine administrative matter, but you understand that your freedman is alerting you to a potential security risk while maintaining plausible deniability about the source and nature of his concerns. Another message comes from your wife's personal attendant, a woman whose position gives her access to conversations and information that might not reach you through official channels. Her letter discusses arrangements for an upcoming dinner party, but the guest list and seating arrangements reveal important information about current alliances and tensions among the court's female hierarchy. The dinner will include the wives of several prominent senators, women whose social interactions often reflect and influence their husbands' political relationships. The proposed seating arrangement has been carefully designed to avoid placing certain women near each other, suggesting ongoing conflicts or rivalries that could have broader political implications. Your wife's attendant is seeking your approval for arrangements that will minimize social friction while maximize opportunities for gathering useful information. A third message comes from one of your provincial governors, writing ostensibly about routine administrative matters, but actually providing intelligence about potential political developments in Rome itself. The governor has learned through his own network of contacts that certain senators have been meeting privately to discuss unspecified matters of common concern, meetings that have not been reported through official channels. The information is vague and possibly insignificant, but the governor felt obligated to report it because of his personal loyalty to your administration and his awareness that unreported senatorial meetings could potentially pose security risks. His letter is carefully worded to provide the information without making specific accusations or creating unnecessary alarm, leaving you to decide how seriously to take the intelligence. While reviewing these messages, you're interrupted by the arrival of a delegation from one of your client kingdoms, representatives of a local ruler who maintains his throne through Roman support and protection. The delegation has brought gifts including exotic animals, rare spices, and carefully crafted artworks that demonstrate both their ruler's wealth and his continued loyalty to Rome. Among the gifts is a magnificent peacock, its brilliant plumage displayed in the afternoon sunlight that streams through the palace windows. The bird is beautiful and valuable, a living symbol of luxury and refinement that will enhance the palace's reputation for magnificence. But you also wonder about the timing of the gift and the possible meanings that might be attached to presenting an emperor with such a conspicuously ornamental creature. The delegation's spokesman, a cultured man who speaks excellent Latin despite his foreign origins, presents the gifts with appropriate ceremony while delivering greetings from his ruler and assurances of continued loyalty and cooperation. His speech is formal and diplomatic, covering the expected topics of mutual friendship, shared interests, and common goals. But you listen carefully for any subtle messages that might be embedded within the conventional phrases. After the formal presentation, you grant the delegation a private audience to discuss more substantive matters related to their kingdom's relationship with Rome. The conversation reveals some of the complexities involved in managing client states, the delicate balance between Roman control and local autonomy that characterizes much of imperial frontier policy. The client king is facing pressure from neighboring tribes who resent his alliance with Rome and have been conducting raids across his territory's borders. He needs Roman military support to maintain stability, but is reluctant to request formal intervention because it would undermine his reputation for independent leadership among his own people. The delegation seeks assurance of Roman backing while trying to maintain the fiction that their ruler remains a sovereign ally rather than a dependent client. Your response must balance several competing considerations: the practical need to maintain stability in a strategically important region, the diplomatic requirement to respect the sensibilities of a loyal ally, and the broader imperial policy of managing client relationships without overextending Roman military resources. You provide appropriate assurances while making it clear that Roman support comes with expectations of continued loyalty and cooperation. As the delegation concludes its business and prepares to return to their homeland, you're approached by one of your personal food tasters, a slave whose survival depends on his ability to detect potential poisons in your meals. He reports that this morning's routine testing revealed some unusual characteristics in one of the dishes prepared for your lunch. Nothing definitely harmful, but enough variation from normal patterns to warrant attention. The information is troubling, but not necessarily alarming, since variations in food preparation can result from numerous innocent causes, including changes in ingredients, cooking methods, or storage conditions. However, the food taster's training and experience make his observations worth taking seriously, particularly given the constant threat of assassination that shadows every aspect of imperial life. You decide to order a complete review of kitchen procedures and personnel, a precautionary measure that will either identify innocent explanations for the variations or reveal more serious security concerns. The investigation will be conducted quietly to avoid creating unnecessary alarm while ensuring that all aspects of food preparation receive appropriate scrutiny. The afternoon continues with a series of smaller meetings and consultations, each involving individuals whose specialized knowledge or unique access to information makes them valuable to imperial decision-making. A merchant who trades throughout the eastern provinces provides insights into economic conditions and political developments in regions far from Rome. A scholar who studies barbarian tribes offers analysis of potential threats and opportunities along the empire's northern frontiers. These conversations are informal but important, providing you with perspectives and information that supplement the official reports generated by provincial governors and military commanders. The merchant's observations about changing trade patterns might indicate emerging economic opportunities or potential security concerns. The scholar's analysis of tribal politics could influence decisions about military deployments and diplomatic initiatives. As evening approaches, you retire to your private study to review the day's accumulation of information and consider its implications for ongoing imperial policies and future decision-making. The room is quiet, except for the soft scratching of pens, as secretaries prepare summaries and recommendations based on the day's meetings and correspondence. Chapter 6. The Imperial Lunch. Guilt served cold. The midday meal arrives with ceremony that masks underlying tensions, carried by a procession of servants whose careful movements reflect both training and anxiety. Each dish has been prepared under the supervision of your chief cook, a freedman whose reputation and life depend on the quality and safety of everything that reaches your table. The meal represents not just nutrition, but a complex web of security protocols, political symbolism, and social hierarchy. Your dining chamber overlooks one of the palace's inner courtyards, where fountains play among carefully tended gardens that bloom with flowers brought from every corner of the empire. The room itself is decorated with frescoes depicting scenes of abundance and prosperity, images of overflowing cornucopias and fertile landscapes that celebrate the empire's capacity to provide luxury and comfort for its ruler. The table is set with dishes of silver and gold, goblets carved from precious stones, and utensils crafted by the finest artisans in Rome. Each piece represents enormous wealth and skilled craftsmanship, but also serves practical purposes related to detecting potential poisons and maintaining the dignity appropriate to imperial dining. The precious metals used in the tableware are believed to change color if they come into contact with certain toxins, providing an additional layer of security beyond the human food tasters. Your lunch companions today include several trusted advisors and a few carefully selected guests whose presence serves various political and social purposes. A successful merchant, whose business interests span multiple provinces, provides informal intelligence about economic conditions and commercial developments. A retired general, whose military experience makes him valuable for strategic consultations, offers perspectives on defense and security matters. The meal itself reflects the complex logistics required to feed an emperor in appropriate style, while maintaining security and demonstrating imperial magnificence. The first course consists of delicacies gathered from throughout the known world, ingredients that represent the empire's geographic scope and commercial reach, oysters from British waters, preserved in salt and transported hundreds of miles to reach your table, exotic fruits from African provinces, carefully selected for ripeness and transported in special containers designed to preserve their quality during the long journey to Rome. Each dish is presented by servants who have been carefully vetted and trained for their roles in the imperial household. They approach the table with measured steps, their movements choreographed to avoid any sudden gestures that might be interpreted as threatening. Before any food reaches your plate, it is sampled by designated tasters whose job is to detect potential poisons and whose survival provides ongoing assurance of the meal's safety. The conversation during lunch is carefully modulated to maintain appropriate dignity, while allowing for the exchange of useful information and the conduct of necessary business. Your merchant guest describes recent developments in the silk trade, explaining how political changes in distant kingdoms have affected the flow of luxury goods to Roman markets. His observations provide insights into diplomatic relationships and economic trends that might influence future imperial policies. The retired general discusses recent intelligence reports from the northern frontiers, analyzing barbarian tribal movements and their potential implications for border security. His professional expertise helps you understand the military significance of various developments, while his personal experience with frontier warfare provides context for evaluating the recommendations of current field commanders. Between courses, servants pour wine that has been mixed with water according to your personal preferences, the proportions carefully calculated to provide mild stimulation without compromising mental clarity. The wine itself comes from the finest vineyards in Italia, grapes grown on estates that have supplied imperial tables for generations, their quality guaranteed by long tradition and careful supervision. The main course features meats prepared according to recipes developed by the palace's culinary staff, dishes that demonstrate both technical skill and creative innovation. Roasted fowls stuffed with exotic spices and served with sauces made from ingredients that most Romans will never taste. Fish caught in distant waters and transported in containers designed to maintain freshness during the journey to the imperial kitchen. As you eat, you're aware that outside the palace walls, millions of Roman citizens are consuming far simpler fare, bread and vegetables, and occasional meat when they can afford it. The contrast between imperial luxury and common poverty is a constant reality of your position, one that requires careful management to maintain both the dignity of your office and the loyalty of your subjects. Your awareness of this contrast is sharpened by reports you've received about recent grain shortages in some of the city's poorer districts, situations that could lead to unrest. The imperial court exists in a state of perpetual motion, a complex ecosystem where information flows like water through carefully constructed channels of gossip, rumor, and carefully leaked intelligence. Every corridor conversation, every shared meal, every casual encounter between courtiers, carries the potential for alliance or betrayal, advancement or destruction. The palace itself seems designed to facilitate these interactions, with its interconnected courtyards, shadowed alcoves, and multiple routes between destinations that allow for both chance encounters and carefully orchestrated meetings that appear accidental but serve specific political purposes. Your freedmen occupy a particularly complex position within this hierarchy, elevated from slavery to positions of tremendous influence, yet forever marked by their origins and dependent on imperial favor for their continued prosperity. Narcissus, your secretary for correspondence, controls access to information that could topple governments or make fortunes, yet his power remains entirely derivative and could disappear with a single word of imperial displeasure. He moves through the palace with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how valuable his services are, but also with the caution of someone who understands that his elevation from slavery makes him a target for resentment from those born to positions he now occupies through merit and imperial favor. The morning brings its usual parade of subtle interactions that serve as the court's primary form of communication. A senator's wife mentions during a seemingly casual conversation that her husband has been receiving visits from men she doesn't recognize. A palace guard commander makes an offhand comment about increased activity in certain senatorial districts during the previous night. A kitchen servant reports that someone has been asking unusual questions about the emperor's dining preferences and the timing of meals. Each observation seems insignificant in isolation, but collectively they form patterns that your network of informants and analysts piece together into intelligence assessments that might prevent assassination attempts or uncover brewing conspiracies. The women of the imperial household navigate their own complex political landscape, one where influence must be exercised indirectly, but where the stakes can be equally high. Your wife receives visits from senators' wives, conversations that ostensibly focus on fashion, social events, and family matters, but that actually serve as diplomatic negotiations between different court factions. These women possess their own networks of information and influence, often more extensive and better informed than their husbands' political connections. They understand that a whispered comment about someone's financial difficulties or marital problems can be more devastating than any senatorial debate. The afternoon brings an incident that illustrates the surreal nature of court life and its potential dangers. Senator Gaius Verres arrives for a routine meeting but brings with him an unusual gift, a magnificent peacock whose brilliant plumage catches the light streaming through the palace windows. The bird struts across the marble floor with the confidence of nobility, its tail feathers creating a natural spectacle that draws admiration from everyone present. Yet as you watch the creature's display, your mind immediately begins calculating potential threats. Is this genuinely a gesture of respect and friendship, or could the bird somehow carry poison, harbor disease, or serve as a signal to Confederates waiting for some predetermined action? The gift of the peacock reveals the impossible complexity of interpreting gestures within the imperial court. Varus explains that the bird comes from his estate in Sicily, a magnificent creature that he thought would add beauty to the imperial gardens. His manner seems sincere, his explanation reasonable, yet you cannot forget that this same senator has been mentioned in recent intelligence reports as someone whose financial situation might make him vulnerable to corruption. The peacock could represent nothing more than an expensive attempt to curry favor, or it might be part of an elaborate plot whose full dimensions remain hidden beneath the surface of apparent friendship. Your advisors gather around the magnificent bird, each offering interpretations that reveal as much about their own perspectives and loyalties as about the potential significance of Verus' gift. The palace veterinarian examines the peacock for signs of disease or hidden dangers, while your intelligence chief considers whether its arrival might be coordinated with other suspicious activities. The steward responsible for the imperial menagerie calculates the costs of proper care for such an exotic creature, while your personal secretary wonders whether accepting the gift creates obligations or precedents that might prove inconvenient in future dealings with the senator. The peacock itself seems oblivious to the political calculations its presence has triggered, more interested in exploring its new surroundings than in serving as an instrument of conspiracy or diplomacy. It examines the marble statues with apparent curiosity, samples water from a decorative fountain, and eventually settles in a patch of sunlight where its iridescent feathers create a shifting pattern of colors that would inspire poets if they weren't busy wondering whether beauty might conceal danger. The creature's natural behavior provides no clues about its donor's intentions, leaving you to make decisions based entirely on incomplete information and educated paranoia. The presence of the peacock transforms what should have been a routine administrative meeting into an exercise in political psychology. Varus watches your reaction to his gift with the intensity of someone whose future might depend on imperial approval. Yet his attention could equally stem from genuine desire to please, or from anxiety about whether his true purposes have been detected. The other courtiers present adjust their own behavior based on your apparent response to the situation, creating a complex web of performance and counter-performance where everyone acts according to their interpretation of everyone else's motivations and fears. As evening approaches, the pace of court intrigue accelerates rather than diminishes. The twilight hours have always been favored for the most sensitive conversations, when shadows provide cover for meetings that cannot bear scrutiny, and when the day's official business gives way to the unofficial negotiations that often prove more consequential than formal proceedings. Your spies report increased activity in certain quarters of the city, unusual patterns of movement that might indicate preparation for something significant, though whether that something threatens your reign or simply involves routine criminal activity remains frustratingly unclear. The dinner hour brings its own set of challenges, as the imperial dining room fills with guests whose presence reflects careful calculations about loyalty, influence, and the need to maintain surveillance over potential threats. Tonight's attendees include senators whose support you need for upcoming legislation, military commanders whose loyalty requires constant reinforcement, and wealthy citizens whose financial resources could prove crucial in times of crisis. Yet each invitation also represents a risk, bringing potential enemies into close proximity while providing them with opportunities to observe your habits, your security arrangements, and your personal relationships. The conversation during dinner flows through topics that seem innocuous, but carry deeper significance for those trained to listen for subtext and hidden meanings. A discussion of recent theatrical performances becomes a debate about the proper limits of artistic expression and the dangers of allowing too much freedom to those who might use entertainment to spread seditious ideas. Comments about the weather lead to conversations about agricultural conditions and their potential impact on grain supplies, trade routes, and the stability of provinces whose loyalty depends partly on economic prosperity. Your food taster performs his duties with the professionalism that comes from years of experience. Yet his role serves as a constant reminder of the dangers that surround even the most basic human activities. Every dish must be tested, every cup examined, every serving utensil inspected for signs of tampering. The process adds time and complexity to what should be a simple meal, while providing guests with regular reminders that dining with the emperor involves risks that extend far beyond indigestion or poor table manners. The evening's entertainment reflects the same complex blend of pleasure and politics that characterizes all aspects of court life. Musicians perform pieces that demonstrate the empire's cultural sophistication, while their selection of songs and the emphasis they place on particular passages might carry messages for those trained to interpret such communications. Dancers present choreographed performances that showcase physical beauty and artistic skill, while their movements could theoretically conceal signals or coded information for confederates among the audience. A poet rises to recite verses supposedly composed in honor of imperial victories, but his words are chosen as carefully as any diplomatic communication. References to historical events might carry contemporary relevance. Praise for past emperors could contain implicit criticisms of present policies, and even the rhythm and meter of his verses might be designed to reinforce particular ideas or emotions. The audience listens with appreciation for the artistic merit of the performance while simultaneously analyzing every line for potential double meanings or hidden messages. The night deepens, and gradually, the more casual guests take their leave, reducing the gathering to a smaller group of individuals whose presence reflects either exceptional trust or exceptional suspicion. These final conversations happen in lower voices and cover topics too sensitive for wider discussion. Intelligence reports that arrive too late for the afternoon briefings, personnel changes that might affect the balance of power within the palace hierarchy, and assessments of potential threats that require immediate attention or careful monitoring. As the last guests depart, you find yourself alone with your closest advisors in a chamber where the peacock has been temporarily housed while permanent arrangements are made. The magnificent bird has settled for the night, its brilliant plumage folded and its head tucked in sleep. Yet its presence continues to symbolize the impossible complexity of interpreting motives and managing relationships within the imperial court. Tomorrow will bring new gifts, new conversations, new opportunities for alliance or betrayal, and new tests of your ability to navigate the treacherous currents of palace politics. The final hours before sleep offer little respite from the day's tensions. Your personal chambers must be inspected by guards whose loyalty has been verified but never fully guaranteed. The The bed linens are changed by servants whose families serve as hostages for their faithfulness, yet whose access to your most private moments makes them potential instruments of assassination or espionage. Even sleep itself becomes a political act, a demonstration of confidence in your security arrangements and trust in those responsible for protecting your life during the hours when you cannot protect yourself. The peacock's presence in the palace serves as a perfect metaphor for court life itself. Beautiful, exotic, attention-grabbing, yet potentially dangerous in ways that may never be fully understood. Like the bird, the court's intrigue displays itself openly while concealing its true nature, creating patterns that please the eye, while serving purposes that might threaten the observer. In this environment, paranoia becomes a survival skill, suspicion a form of wisdom, and the ability to find beauty in dangerous circumstances, the only path to maintaining sanity in a world where every relationship carries the potential for both salvation and destruction. 6. The Imperial Lunch. Guilt served cold. The midday meal arrives with all the ceremony and trepidation that characterizes every aspect of imperial dining. A complex ritual where nourishment becomes secondary to the political theater of consumption under constant scrutiny. The dining chamber has been prepared since dawn, with servants arranging couches in precise configurations that reflect the hierarchy of imperial favor and the subtle relationships between guests, whose placement at the meal will be analyzed and discussed throughout the city before the sun sets. Each position relative to your own couch carries meaning that extends far beyond comfort or convenience, communicating messages about imperial approval, political alliances, and the rise or fall of individual courtiers' influence within the palace hierarchy. The menu itself represents a careful balance between displaying the empire's vast reach and resources while avoiding the appearance of excessive luxury that might provide ammunition for critics who whisper about imperial decadence and disconnection from traditional Roman values. Today's offerings include peacock prepared with spices from India, indicating the extent of Roman trade networks and the wealth that flows through imperial territories. There are oysters transported in tanks of seawater from the distant shores of Britain, demonstrating the logistical capabilities of Roman engineering and the lengths to which the imperial kitchen will go to provide exotic delicacies for your table. The preparation of each dish involves multiple layers of security and verification that transform cooking into an exercise in counterintelligence. The ingredients have been sourced from suppliers whose backgrounds have been investigated, whose families are known to imperial agents, and whose continued prosperity depends entirely on maintaining the trust they've been granted. The cooks themselves work under constant supervision, their every action observed by guards trained to detect suspicious behavior, unusual preparations, or the introduction of substances that might serve purposes other than culinary enhancement. Your personal food taster approaches each dish with the solemnity of someone performing a religious ritual, understanding that his role requires him to risk his life with every bite in order to preserve yours. He samples each preparation methodically, waiting the prescribed interval to ensure that any potential poison has time to manifest its effects before the dish is presented to you. His face remains carefully neutral throughout this process, revealing nothing about the flavors he experiences or any physical sensations that might indicate danger. The other guests watch this performance with fascination and discomfort, reminded with each tasting that sharing a meal with the emperor involves risks that extend far beyond social embarrassment or political miscalculation. The first course arrives with fanfare, appropriate to its exotic nature: flamingo tongue prepared with honey and wine, a delicacy so rare and expensive that its very presence on the table demonstrates imperial power, while simultaneously raising questions about the moral implications of such extravagance. The preparation requires the death of dozens of beautiful birds to provide enough meat for a single course, a sacrifice that seems excessive even by the standards of imperial luxury. Yet refusing to serve such dishes would suggest either financial difficulty or an uncomfortable level of concern for creatures whose lives matter little compared to the emperor's pleasure and prestige. The guests approach their own portions with varying degrees of enthusiasm and discomfort. Some senators embrace the opportunity to participate in imperial luxury, savoring flavors they could never afford in their private lives and enjoying the social elevation that comes from dining at the emperor's table. Others seem troubled by the excess, perhaps thinking of constituents struggling with basic nutrition, while their representatives feast on delicacies that cost more than most citizens earn in a year. Their faces reveal internal conflicts between political necessity and personal conscience, between the requirements of court participation and their private moral reservations. As the meal progresses, conversation flows through topics that seem designed to avoid any subject that might disturb the dining experience. Yet every exchange carries potential political significance. A discussion of recent gladiatorial games becomes an analysis of public mood and the effectiveness of entertainment as a tool for managing citizen satisfaction. Comments about the weather lead to considerations of agricultural conditions and their potential impact on grain supplies, taxation revenue, and the stability of provinces whose loyalty depends partly on economic prosperity and partly on their perception of imperial competence in managing practical challenges. The second course presents an even more challenging moral complexity: dormice that have been specially fattened in darkness, fed on nuts and honey until they reach a size and flavor that gourmets consider perfect. The preparation of this dish requires keeping intelligent creatures in conditions of artificial constraint, feeding them luxurious diets while denying them natural behaviors, all to produce a culinary experience that lasts mere minutes. The symbolism seems almost too obvious to ignore. Like the dormice, everyone present lives in a form of golden captivity, fed luxury and comfort while being denied the freedom to act according to their natural inclinations. Your own relationship with the food before you is complicated by knowledge of its costs, both financial and moral. Every bite represents resources that could feed dozens of ordinary citizens, yet refusing to eat would send political messages that might undermine imperial authority or suggest weaknesses that enemies could exploit. The emperor must appear to enjoy the privileges of office while somehow maintaining connection to traditional Roman values and concern for citizen welfare. This balance requires a performance as careful as any diplomatic negotiation, with every gesture and expression monitored for signs of excess, indifference, or inappropriate restraint. The wine service provides another layer of complexity to the dining experience, with selections that demonstrate the breadth of imperial territories while requiring additional security measures to prevent poisoning. The vessels themselves are works of art, crafted from precious metals and decorated with scenes that celebrate imperial victories and divine favor. Yet their beauty cannot disguise the fact that they must be tested and inspected before use, that their contents must be verified by multiple tasters, and that even the act of drinking becomes a calculated risk in an environment where assassination attempts can be disguised as hospitality. Midway through the meal, a disturbing report arrives via a messenger, whose presence disrupts the carefully orchestrated atmosphere of imperial dining. Urban riots have broken out in Alexandria, sparked by grain shortages that have left thousands of citizens without adequate food, while the imperial court consumes delicacies that could feed entire neighborhoods. The irony is immediate and uncomfortable. Here you sit, surrounded by more food than you could possibly consume, while subjects whose loyalty supports your reign face starvation that could drive them to rebellion against the very system that provides your luxury. The guests' reactions to this news reveal the complex psychology of imperial service and complicity. Some seem genuinely distressed by the reports of citizens suffering, their appetites diminished by awareness of the contrast between their current circumstances and the desperation of those they theoretically serve. Others appear more concerned about the political implications of unrest, calculating how riots in one province might spread to others, and what measures might be necessary to maintain order and imperial authority. A few continue eating with apparent indifference, either because they've learned to compartmentalize their emotions, or because they genuinely feel no connection to the suffering of people they've never met, and whose lives seem as distant as mythology. Your own response to the news must balance several competing requirements, showing appropriate concern for citizen welfare without appearing weak or overly emotional, demonstrating decisive leadership without seeming to panic or overreact, and maintaining the dignity and authority expected of divine rulership while acknowledging the human costs of imperial policies. The other diners watch your reaction carefully, understanding that your handling of this moment will influence their own political calculations and their assessments of imperial competence and character. The meal continues despite the disturbing news, but the atmosphere has shifted from celebration to something more somber and complex. Conversations become more subdued, though whether from genuine concern or political calculation remains unclear. The exotic dishes continue to arrive from the kitchen, but their appeal has diminished for guests now aware of the stark contrast between their luxury and the desperation of citizens whose taxes and labor support the system that provides such abundance to so few. The final course presents the ultimate paradox of imperial dining, a dessert so elaborate and expensive that its creation required the labor of dozens of artisans and the resources of multiple provinces, yet its consumption provides pleasure that lasts mere moments and leaves no lasting satisfaction. The honeyed fruits, the imported nuts, the delicate pastries shaped into artistic representations of imperial victories, all dissolve on the tongue, leaving behind only the memory of flavors and the lingering awareness of their cost in both resources and human suffering. As the meal concludes, the guests begin their careful departures, each taking leave according to protocols that reflect their status and their relationship to imperial favor. Some linger for private conversations that might address the disturbing news from Alexandria or other matters too sensitive for general discussion. Others depart quickly, perhaps eager to escape an atmosphere that has become increasingly uncomfortable as the contrast between luxury and suffering has become impossible to ignore. You remain in the dining chamber after the last guest has departed, surrounded by the remnants of a feast that cost more than most citizens will earn in their lifetimes. The empty plates and cups serve as tangible reminders of the moral complexities of imperial life, where every pleasure comes with costs that extend far beyond personal consequences. The afternoon stretches ahead with its own obligations and challenges, but the memory of this meal will linger, a reminder that power brings not just privileges, but also the burden of responsibility for consequences that echo far beyond the palace walls. Justice in the afternoon. Trials and spectacle. The afternoon tribunal convenes in a chamber designed to awe both participants and observers, its marble columns and bronze decorations, creating an atmosphere where human judgment takes on the weight of divine pronouncement. The raised platform from which you preside over legal proceedings places you literally above the fray, while symbolically positioning imperial authority as the ultimate source of justice within the Roman system. Yet this elevation also creates isolation, separating you from the human drama unfolding below, while burdening you with decisions that will determine whether the accused live or die, prosper or face destruction that extends to their families and descendants. The first case involves accusations that strike at the heart of imperial security and the complex relationships between loyalty, ambition, and survival that define life for anyone connected to the palace hierarchy. General Marcus Brutus Maximus stands accused of treason by his own subordinates, men whose testimony might stem from genuine patriotism, personal grievances, or calculated attempts to advance their own careers by destroying someone whose position they covet. The general himself presents a figure of dignified defiance, his military bearing intact despite the chains that symbolically bind him, his eyes meeting yours with a mixture of respect and challenge that suggests either innocence or exceptional courage in the face of almost certain death. The accusations against the general paint a picture of conspiracy that seems both entirely plausible and impossibly complex. His accusers claim that he has been in secret communication with Germanic tribal leaders, sharing information about Roman military deployments in exchange for promises of future support should he choose to rebel against imperial authority. They produce letters allegedly written in his hand, witness testimony from soldiers who claim to have observed suspicious meetings, and evidence of unexplained wealth that might represent payments from foreign enemies. Yet each piece of evidence admits alternative explanations, and the accusers themselves have obvious motives for seeking the general's destruction. Your examination of the evidence requires skills that no education adequately provides, and wisdom that comes only from surviving years of similar accusations, counter-accusations, and revelations of truth that often prove more complex than any fiction. The letters bearing the general's seal could have been forged by enemies with access to official documents and knowledge of his writing style. The witness testimony might reflect genuine observations of legitimate military consultations, personal grievances unrelated to treason, or carefully orchestrated perjury designed to eliminate a rival. The unexplained wealth could represent legitimate spoils of war, bribes from sources unrelated to foreign enemies, or plant evidence designed to support false accusations. The general's defense reveals the impossible position faced by anyone accused of treason in a system where suspicion itself becomes evidence, and where loyalty must be demonstrated rather than assumed. He speaks eloquently of his years of faithful service to Rome, his victories in battles that expanded imperial territory and secured crucial frontiers. He presents his own witnesses, soldiers who testify to his courage, competence, and unwavering dedication to Roman interests. Yet his very eloquence becomes suspect in an environment where smooth words might conceal treacherous intentions, and his military success could be interpreted as evidence of ambition that might eventually turn against the emperor who currently commands his loyalty. The complexity of the case reflects broader challenges in maintaining imperial security while preserving some semblance of justice and rational governance. Anyone with the skills and resources necessary to serve effectively in high positions also possesses the capabilities required for successful treason. Military commanders must maintain relationships with foreign leaders, governors need intelligence about conditions beyond Roman borders, and successful officials inevitably accumulate wealth and influence that could theoretically support rebellion. The line between necessary competence and dangerous ambition often exists only in the minds of those making such distinctions, subject to interpretation, influenced by political considerations, personal relationships, and the constant pressure to demonstrate loyalty by identifying disloyalty in others. The afternoon's second case presents different challenges, but equally complex moral and political implications. A prominent poet stands accused of sedition, his crime consisting of verses that allegedly mock imperial authority through subtle wordplay and classical allusions that educated readers would recognize as criticism. The prosecution argues that his latest work contains references to historical tyrants that readers would naturally associate with contemporary rulers, metaphors about slavery and freedom that question the legitimacy of imperial power, and descriptions of natural disasters that could be interpreted as omens predicting political upheaval. The poet's defense rests on the inherent ambiguity of artistic expression and the dangerous precedent that would be established by punishing creativity based on possible interpretations rather than explicit statements. He argues that literature has always drawn on classical themes and historical examples, that metaphor and allusion are fundamental tools of artistic expression, and that reducing poetry to simple political propaganda would impoverish Roman culture while establishing standards of censorship that could eventually be applied to any form of creative expression. His supporters in the courtroom include other writers, philosophers, and wealthy patrons whose own reputations and interests are connected to the principle of artistic freedom. Yet the prosecution's concerns reflect genuine security issues that cannot be dismissed as paranoia or overreaction. Ideas can be as dangerous as armies when they spread through populations already dissatisfied with economic conditions or political constraints. A poem that questions imperial legitimacy might seem harmless when read by a handful of educated elites, but it becomes potentially seditious when copies circulate among broader populations looking for intellectual frameworks to support their practical grievances. The Roman system has always recognized the power of words to shape public opinion and influence political behavior, making the regulation of expression a practical necessity rather than simple tyranny. Your decision in the poet's case must consider not only the specific evidence, but also the broader implications for intellectual freedom, artistic expression, and the delicate balance between security and cultural vitality that helps define Roman civilization. Condemning him might discourage future criticism, but could also stifle the creative energy that contributes to imperial prestige and cultural achievement. Acquitting him might encourage others to test the boundaries of acceptable expression, potentially leading to more explicit challenges to imperial authority. Either choice establishes precedents that will influence similar cases for years to come, while reflecting your own understanding of the relationship between power and creativity. The third case of the afternoon involves commercial disputes that seem mundane compared to accusations of treason and sedition, but that actually reveal equally complex questions about justice, economic policy, and the practical challenges of governing a diverse empire with varied local customs and legal traditions. A group of merchants from Syria accuses their Roman business partners of fraud, claiming that contracts for grain shipments were deliberately violated to take advantage of price fluctuations in different markets. The Roman defendants argue that the Syrians misunderstood standard business practices and that their accusations stem from cultural differences rather than deliberate deception. The evidence in this case consists largely of commercial documents written in multiple languages, witness testimony about conversations that took place in various dialects, and competing interpretations of business customs that vary significantly between different regions of the empire. The merchants' dispute reflects broader tensions between Roman legal traditions and local practices, between imperial standardization and regional autonomy, and between the practical needs of commerce and the political requirements of maintaining harmony among diverse populations with different cultural expectations and economic systems. Your judgment in this case will influence not only the immediate parties, but also the broader framework for commercial law throughout the empire. Favoring the Syrian merchants might encourage similar complaints from other provincial traders, while potentially undermining confidence in Roman business practices. Supporting the Roman defendants could be seen as ethnic favoritism, while discouraging foreign merchants whose participation in imperial trade networks contributes to overall economic prosperity. The decision requires balancing legal principles with practical politics, immediate justice with long-term economic policy, and the competing claims of different groups whose continued cooperation is essential for imperial stability. As the afternoon progresses, the accumulated weight of judicial decisions begins to take its toll on both your mental energy and your faith in the possibility of achieving true justice in a system where political considerations inevitably influence legal outcomes. Each case presents competing claims supported by evidence that admits multiple interpretations, witnesses whose motivations remain questionable, and implications that extend far beyond the immediate parties involved. The emperor's role as ultimate judge requires making definitive decisions based on incomplete information while accepting responsibility for consequences that may not become apparent until years after the verdicts are rendered. The final case of the day involves a family dispute that has escalated into accusations of murder, inheritance fraud, and conspiracy. The complexity of the relationships involved, the contradictory testimony from various family members, and the obvious personal animosities that color every statement make it almost impossible to determine truth from fabrication, legitimate grievance from petty revenge, and legal issues from personal psychology. Yet a decision must be made, consequences must be assigned, and justice must appear to be served even when the evidence suggests that no outcome will truly satisfy the requirements of fairness or resolve the underlying conflicts that generated the dispute. As the tribunal concludes, you realize that the afternoon's proceedings have illustrated the fundamental challenges of wielding imperial authority in a world where absolute power creates absolute responsibility for outcomes that no human wisdom can perfect. The decisions you've made will affect dozens of lives directly and hundreds more indirectly, establishing precedents that will influence future cases while reflecting your own understanding of justice, security, and the complex balance between competing values that defines imperial governance. The weight of these choices will follow you into the evening and beyond, adding to the accumulating burden of authority that makes restful sleep increasingly elusive as the responsibilities of power multiply with each passing day. 8. Entertainment or distraction. Games, gladiators, and grumbling crowds. The roar of the crowd reaches you even before you enter the imperial box at the Colosseum, a sound that carries across the marble corridors and bronze-fitted doorways with the raw power of 50,000 voices united in anticipation of spectacle and bloodshed. This is not the polite applause of senatorial chambers or the measured conversations of palace dining rooms, but something more primal and honest, the collective expression of a population whose loyalty to your reign depends partly on your ability to provide them with entertainment that distracts from their daily struggles and reinforces their sense of participation in the grandeur of Roman civilization. Your arrival at the arena triggers a transformation in the crowd's energy that demonstrates both the awesome power of imperial presence and the precarious nature of popular approval. The citizens rise as one when you appear, their cheers echoing off the stone walls and wooden seats with an intensity that seems to shake the very foundations of the massive structure. Yet experienced ears can detect subtle variations in the enthusiasm, sections where the applause seems forced or delayed, areas where the cheering dies away more quickly than others. The crowd's response is simultaneously genuine and performed, spontaneous and calculated, a reflection of both authentic emotion and political necessity. The imperial box itself has been designed to project authority while providing security, elevated above the arena floor to demonstrate your superiority over the proceedings while surrounded by guards whose presence reminds everyone that even popular entertainment requires constant vigilance against potential threats. The cushioned seats offer comfort appropriate to divine status, while the bronze railings and marble decorations announce imperial wealth and taste. Yet the positioning also creates a subtle form of imprisonment, making you as much a spectacle for the crowd as the gladiators are entertainment for you, your every reaction observed and analyzed by thousands of pairs of eyes looking for signs of approval, displeasure, weakness, or strength. The day's program reflects careful planning designed to maintain crowd enthusiasm while avoiding the kind of excessive expenditure that might strain imperial finances or create expectations impossible to meet in future games. The morning's events begin with animal hunts that demonstrate the empire's reach and power by presenting exotic creatures from the furthest corners of Roman territory. Lions from Africa pace behind wooden barriers, their golden coats gleaming in the amphitheater's carefully calculated lighting. Bears from Germania lumber across the sand, with a power that reminds viewers of the dangerous forces Rome has conquered and contained. Elephants from distant India trumpet their confusion and fear, magnificent creatures reduced to props in a display of imperial dominance over nature itself. The crowd's reaction to these animal spectacles reveals complex attitudes toward power, nature, and the relationship between civilization and wilderness that define Roman cultural values. Citizens cheer when skilled hunters bring down dangerous predators, applauding demonstrations of human courage and competence that reflect their understanding of Rome's triumph over chaotic natural forces. They gasp with appreciation when exotic animals display behaviors that showcase the wonderful diversity of imperial territories. Yet there are also moments of uncomfortable silence when the violence becomes too graphic, or when magnificent creatures die in ways that seem unnecessarily cruel, even by Roman standards of entertainment. Your own response to the animal hunts must balance several competing requirements, showing appropriate appreciation for the spectacle while avoiding excessive enthusiasm that might suggest bloodthirstiness, demonstrating imperial generosity in providing such expensive entertainment while maintaining dignity appropriate to divine authority, and projecting strength and confidence while remaining sensitive to crowd mood and potential shifts in popular opinion. Every gesture is observed, every expression analyzed, every reaction interpreted as evidence of imperial character and competence. The midday break traditionally features the execution of condemned criminals, a practical combination of justice and entertainment that serves multiple administrative purposes, while providing the crowd with moral satisfaction derived from witnessing the punishment of those who have violated Roman law and social order. Today's condemned include thieves whose crimes have been judged serious enough to warrant death, murderers whose actions have shocked local communities, and political prisoners whose offenses against imperial authority require public demonstration of the consequences of disloyalty and rebellion. Yet even these executions require careful management to maintain their effectiveness as both deterrent and entertainment. The methods must be severe enough to satisfy public desire for retribution while avoiding excessive cruelty that might generate sympathy for the condemned or criticism of imperial justice. The timing must allow the crowd to appreciate the moral lessons being demonstrated while preventing the proceedings from becoming so lengthy or repetitive that spectators lose interest. The selection of criminals must represent genuine threats to social order while avoiding cases where public opinion might favor mercy over punishment. The afternoon's gladiatorial combat represents the culmination of the day's entertainment, the moment when individual skill, courage, and luck determine outcomes that provide the crowd with the most intense emotional experiences that the arena can offer. Today's matches have been arranged to provide variety in fighting styles, weapons, and probable outcomes, while maintaining the unpredictability that makes gladiatorial combat genuinely exciting rather than merely choreographed performance. Experienced fighters face newcomers in combinations designed to test skill against hunger, veteran cunning against youthful strength, and different fighting techniques against each other in ways that demonstrate the diversity and sophistication of gladiatorial training. The first match features two heavily armed gladiators, whose fighting style emphasizes defensive techniques and careful maneuvering over quick, decisive action. Their armor gleams in the afternoon sun as they circle each other with the patience of professionals who understand that survival depends more on avoiding mistakes than on spectacular offensive moves. The crowd watches with educated appreciation for the subtle techniques being displayed, the small advantages gained and lost through positioning, timing, and the psychological warfare that skilled gladiators conduct through gesture, expression, and movement, even when not actively engaged in combat. As the fight progresses, the crowd's emotional investment deepens, their cheers and gasps reflecting genuine engagement with the unfolding drama of two men whose lives hang in the balance of skill, luck, and popular opinion. Some spectators clearly favor one fighter over the other, their preferences based on previous performances, physical appearance, fighting style, or simply personal inclination. Others remain neutral, content to appreciate technical competence regardless of which gladiator demonstrates it. The diversity of crowd response reminds you that the citizens watching these games are not a monolithic mass, but individuals with their own opinions, preferences, and criteria for judging the spectacle before them. The match reaches its climax when one gladiator gains a decisive advantage, his opponent wounded and unable to continue effective resistance. The moment of potential death creates a hush in the arena as 50,000 people wait to see whether mercy or execution will conclude the contest. All eyes turn to the imperial box, where your gesture will determine whether the defeated fighter lives to fight another day or dies for the crowd's entertainment. The decision carries no significant political consequences, yet it serves as a test of imperial character observed by more citizens than will ever see you in any other context. Your choice in this moment reflects not just personal inclination, but careful calculation of crowd mood, the defeated gladiator's performance, the broader message you wish to send about imperial justice and mercy, and the precedent you want to establish for similar situations throughout the day. A gesture of mercy might demonstrate imperial magnanimity and generate genuine popular appreciation, but could also be interpreted as weakness if applied too frequently. A decision for execution might satisfy bloodthirsty spectators while potentially alienating those who admire courage even in defeat. The apparently simple choice between life and death becomes a complex exercise in public psychology and political communication, The day's final contest features a massive battle involving dozens of gladiators divided into opposing teams, a spectacular conclusion designed to provide maximum visual impact while testing organizational skills, group tactics, and individual heroism in ways that individual matches cannot achieve. The combatants enter the arena with the pageantry of military units, their weapons and armor glittering in the late afternoon light as they arrange themselves for combat that will leave many dead and elevate others to the status of arena heroes whose names will be celebrated throughout the city. As the battle unfolds, its complexity creates multiple simultaneous dramas that challenge spectators to follow individual stories of courage, cowardice, skill, and luck, while appreciating the larger tactical patterns that determine overall outcomes. The crowd's attention shifts from one section of the arena to another, as different phases of the combat reach critical moments, their cheers and groans reflecting the emotional rollercoaster of witnessing life and death struggles that combine the unpredictability of genuine danger with the artistic appeal of skilled performance. The conclusion of the games leaves you emotionally drained despite your role as observer rather than participant. The intensity of crowd emotion, the life and death decisions you've been required to make, and the constant pressure of performing imperial authority under public scrutiny combine to create a form of exhaustion that physical rest alone cannot address. As you prepare to leave the arena, the crowd's final cheers carry both appreciation for the day's entertainment and expectation of future spectacles that will maintain their loyalty and support for your reign. The journey back to the palace provides opportunity for reflection on the complex relationship between imperial power and popular entertainment, between the practical necessity of providing distractions for potentially restive populations and the moral implications of building political stability on foundations of organized violence and public spectacle. The games serve essential functions in maintaining social order and popular support, yet they also reflect aspects of Roman culture and imperial authority that raise uncomfortable questions about the costs of civilization and the methods necessary to maintain it. 9. Evening. Wine, paranoia, and the ghosts of emperors past. The evening descends over the palace like a familiar burden, bringing with it the complex mixture of relief and apprehension that characterizes the transition from public performance to private contemplation. The day's obligations have been fulfilled, the crowd satisfied, the senators appeased, and the immediate crises managed. Yet the approaching darkness also signals the beginning of those quiet hours, when an emperor's mind turns inevitably toward the accumulated weight of decisions made, enemies created, and the persistent question of whether tomorrow's dawn will find him still alive and still in power. Your private chambers await with their carefully maintained atmosphere of luxury and security, but also with the subtle reminders of imperial isolation that become more pronounced as the noise and bustle of palace activity diminishes with the setting sun. The servants who maintain these rooms work with practiced efficiency to ensure every detail meets imperial standards while remaining as invisible as possible, understanding that their master's evening hours require privacy that extends beyond the mere absence of other people to encompass freedom from the constant awareness of being observed, judged, and potentially threatened by those whose livelihood depends on proximity to absolute power. The wine that accompanies your solitary dinner has been selected from the imperial cellars, with the same careful attention to security and symbolism that governs every aspect of imperial consumption. Tonight's vintage comes from vineyards in the hills outside Rome, its origins close enough to ensure freshness while distant enough to require the complex logistics that demonstrate imperial control over resources and territory. The amphora bearing the wine has been inspected for tampering, its contents tested by multiple tasters, and its quality verified by servants whose expertise in such matters has been developed through years of service in the imperial household. Yet even as you appreciate the wine's complexity and craftsmanship, your mind cannot entirely escape the knowledge that this simple pleasure requires an elaborate security apparatus that transforms every meal into a potential battlefield between imperial survival and the constant threats that shadow absolute power. The liquid's deep red color reminds you of blood spilled in the arena, in distant battles, and occasionally in these very chambers when imperial paranoia proved justified and decisive action became necessary to preserve both your life and your throne. The evening meal itself is a more intimate affair than the day's earlier dining experiences, served in chambers designed for contemplation rather than political theater. Tonight's courses reflect seasonal availability and imperial preference rather than the need to impress guests or demonstrate the extent of Roman territorial control. Simple roasted fowl replaces exotic delicacies, locally grown vegetables substitute for rare imports, and bread baked in the palace kitchens provides sustenance without the symbolic weight of more elaborate preparations. This apparent simplicity masks complexities that have become second nature to imperial dining, but that would seem extraordinary to anyone unfamiliar with the security requirements of absolute power. Every ingredient has been traced to its source, every preparation observed by guards trained to detect suspicious activity, and every dish tested for dangers that might range from obvious poisons to subtle substances designed to cause delayed illness or gradual incapacitation. The seemingly casual evening meal requires the coordination of dozens of people whose lives depend on preventing any harmful substance from reaching your lips. As darkness deepens outside the palace windows, your thoughts turn increasingly toward the broader challenges and uncertainties that define imperial